and welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly McNabb, and by my side, as always, is my husband, Barrett McNabb.
Thanks, Kimberly. So the Grand Old Party held the first debate this primary season for the Republican nominee for President of the United States for 2024. We're going to watch it with you and focus on some key highlights and our takeaways.
So without further ado, let's get to it.
Okay.
Tonight, the race for the White House takes flight. Welcome to the first debate of the 2024 presidential campaign, live at Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee.
8 Republican candidates have qualified and have chosen to be here on our debate stage tonight. They are here to lay out their vision for America, the battle as they battle for the GOP nomination. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Brett Baer. This is the very same stage on which the Republican choice for president will accept the party's nomination next summer. The 8 contenders are positioned by the order they sit in the polls, with the highest polling candidates in the middle standing center stage. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Former Vice President Mike Pence.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley.
Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson.
And North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum.
Some ground rules for tonight. We'll ask the questions, and then candidates get 1 minute to answer. If someone is singled out, you get 30 seconds to respond. And when the time runs out, we all will hear this. Very pleasant.
So tonight, these candidates have a big opportunity to break out of the pack and to explain why they are best prepared to be the Republican choice for president. At a time when the likely Democrat nominee, President Joe Biden, is working to convince the country that with Bidenomics, things are looking up.
They call my plan Bidenomics. I'm not sure they meant it in a totally complimentary way at the time. But guess what? It's working.
But is it? More than 65% of Americans say the country is headed in the wrong direction. And here's the reality for some voters we talked to here in Wisconsin this week.
We have noticed a dramatic increase in prices at the grocery store just across the board.
Gas is high and food is high. A lot of people's out here homeless because they can't buy food.
It's tough when you got mortgage rates at 7-8% versus 2 to 3. It's just you can't afford a house anymore.
Inflation is ridiculous. It's killing us out here.
I mean, this is listening to the average American here. We have across genders, across races. You know, these are all Americans. These are all Americans, and they're all hurting. And it's up to the next president, whoever it's going to be, to do something about it. So, I mean, here are real people.
As we sit here tonight, the #1 song on the Billboard chart is called Rich Men North of Richmond. It is by a singer from Farmville, Virginia, named Oliver Anthony. His lyrics speak of alienation, of deep frustration with the state of government and of this country. Washington, D.C. is about 100 miles north of Richmond.
These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control. Want to know what you think, want to know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do, 'cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, 'cause the rich men.
And we did a full video reviewing and having our takeaways from both his first song, Richmond North of Richmond, as well as I Want to Go Home. And so feel free to check those out in our description, and we'll keep going. But it looks like Martha is about to ask the candidates, why is this resonating?
I was looking for the reactions of the candidates to the songs. Vivek, look, I'm not sure what to make of it. It was like that, a little too smiley. And then Haley, she looked charmed by the song, like just nodding her head. And the rest of the candidates didn't seem to have much of a reaction to it.
Yeah, I think they're getting ready to probably look at their response or prepare the response. I don't know behind the scenes. Typically, you don't get to have prepared remarks. You get usually maybe some blank pieces of paper and pens, but you're not allowed to have prepared stuff. So maybe they're just getting ready for whatever question was going to get thrown their way. And it looks like Martha's about to ask it.
So, Governor DeSantis, why is this song striking such a nerve in this country right now? What do you think it means?
Our country is in decline. This decline is not inevitable. It's a choice. We need to send Joe Biden back to his basement and reverse American decline. And it starts with understanding we must reverse Bidenomics so that middle-class families have a chance to succeed again. We cannot succeed as a country if you are working hard and you can't afford groceries, a car, or a new home, while Hunter Biden can make hundreds of thousands of dollars on lousy paintings. That is wrong. We also cannot succeed when the Congress spends trillions and trillions of dollars. Those rich men north of Richmond have put us in this situation. And finally, we need to lower your gas prices. We're going to open up all energy production. We will be energy dominant again in this country. I showed it could be done in the state of Florida. I pledge to you as your president, we will get the job done, and I will not let you down.
Governor DeSantis, thank you. Governor Christie, do you agree with Governor DeSantis just said there, and why would you be better on the economy than him?
Well, look, I do agree predominantly with what Governor DeSantis just laid out. I think that if you asked every one of us up here, that we would agree predominantly with what he just laid out. Here's the difference. The difference is that we're going to have to work and make sure that we sell these ideas and be able to put ourselves in a position where we get a majority of the vote, not only by winning the Congress and the Senate in 24, but also by having someone who's had the experience of doing it. Now, I was elected as a conservative Republican in a blue state with 61% of the vote, with a Democratic legislature against me the entire time. And we still, through hard, strong decision-making, brought them around to our point of view.
That's something I think that is going to be prevalent throughout the entire debate, is not just focusing on the Republican primary.
Right.
But how do you win, or how do they win the general election? And that is going to be, I think, key, because once you get done with the primary season, whoever wins now has to turn around and convince the moderates and independents to come over to the GOP side. Right. And I think that is something that Governor Christie is trying to articulate, that, you have to choose your words carefully, which I think all politicians try and do, but you have to choose your words carefully, but then you have to realize that you need to make it to the general as well in order to win that majority.
Yep.
We cut taxes in New Jersey. We cut debt in New Jersey. We made sure that each and every time we were confronted with bad Democratic ideas, we stood and stopped them. And when there were good ideas, we brought people together to make progress going forward. Truth and accountability are the things we need to do to fight waste. And I'd say the last thing is this, Brett. We cannot sit by any longer and allow the kind of spending that's going on in Washington, because every dollar they spend is a dollar that these people are not allowed to spend on their children and their grandchildren. It's robbing our country, and it's wrong.
Well, Governor, let me just follow up very quickly. New Jersey, when you were governor, had the second lowest credit rating in the nation after Illinois, and it was downgraded 11 times.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what happens when you inherit a blue state that has done that. But when you look at what we did on debt, Brett, in that state, we cut debt in that state, debt that had been left to us by 3 Democratic gubernatorial predecessors of mine who ran up that debt tremendously. And what you also saw us do was to cut the unemployment rate in half. It was over 10% when I became governor in 2010. What we also did was cut pension payments to public employees to make sure that taxpayers were not being soaked by a public employee union system that was killing the taxpayer.
Thank you, Governor.
Senator Scott, excuse me. The song also goes after welfare programs. As a senator, now President Biden argued for freezing federal spending, this was back in the 80s, and dealing with sacred cows. He does not talk about that anymore. You have been a senator, though, for 10 years. So what have you done to rein in the increasing size of government?
Well, thank you for the question. Over the last several years, I've had an opportunity to vote against spending package after spending package after spending package. What we also need to understand is that Joe Biden's Bidenomics has led to the loss of $10,000 of spending power for the average family. When you see 16% inflation, your gas is up 40%, your food is up 20%, your electricity is up 20%. We can stop that by turning the spigot off at Washington, sending the money back to the states, and allowing the decisions to be made at their own houses. I helped write the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. We cut taxes for a single mom like the one that raised me by 70%, for dual households by 60%, returning to the average family $4,000. If you don't send it to Washington, we can't spend it. That's good news for the American people.
Okay, but just to follow up, you did, during the Trump administration, you approved $4.4 trillion, $4.1 trillion, $1.7 trillion over the course of that administration. That's a lot of money.
There's no doubt that during the Trump administration, when we were dealing with the COVID virus, we spent more money. But here's what happened at the end of our time in the majority. We had low unemployment, record low unemployment, 3.5% for the majority of the population, 70-year low for women. African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians had an all-time low, but our inflation was at 2%. Under Joe Biden, we've seen the exact opposite. We've seen inflation explode, which led to 12 Federal Reserve increases that's devastating home buyers today.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you're listening to these answers.
If I may,
hold on one
was
second.
our administration, so I don't know if I get a chance to respond.
He didn't mention you specifically, but we'll be with you in a second, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Ramaswamy, listening to all of this, why should voters choose you over more experienced politicians on this stage? You're basically, a blank slate for people. You're 38 years old. You've said that you only voted in 2 presidential elections before this moment, this political race.
So first, let me just address a question that is on everybody's mind at home tonight. Who the heck is this skinny guy with a funny last name, and what the heck is he doing in the middle of this debate stage? I'll tell you, I'm not a politician, Brett. You're right about that. I'm an entrepreneur. My parents came to this country with no money 40 years ago. I have gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies. I did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, raising our 2 sons, following our faith in God. That is the American dream.
I have a couple comments about him. The skinny kid with a funny last name, that's a quote from Obama when he was running, correct?
Yeah, actually, the time that I first saw that was a television commercial. When, if I'm correct, it was a television commercial when he was running for senator. And I remember a backdrop of Chicago, and then him saying that. So I don't recall whether it was used in his presidential campaign. But I do recall it in his senatorial campaign in Illinois.
I mean, it's a funny joke. It's just I don't personally want to be reminded of Obama. And then he goes on to entrepreneur and creating businesses. I'm like, you sound a lot like Trump. I'm an entrepreneur, no political experiences. I have read that his comment about his parents came over here with no money. I read that his dad was an engineer and his mom was a doctor of some sort, and so they did have some money.
So, I think some of the articles I read, the father did have higher education. He was wound up becoming a patent attorney for General Electric, and his mother was a psychologist or psychiatrist, I believe. So, it is interesting to see whether or not his family came over without money and then got jobs that made money.
Well, he was born shortly after they came.
Right.
But I do appreciate any candidate, which is him and DeSantis, that they both have young children. And so personally, as a couple with also 2 young children, it just feels like you have more skin in the game when it comes to issues like education and morality.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you have skin in the game. If your child is not going through the public education system right now, you might not be fully aware of all the things that are going on, and also in some private schools. But
Plus you're not spending as much on groceries.
Yeah, and you're not spending as much on groceries back then. But now, having the vast majority of politicians that are in that 75-year-old club, it seems as though they're kind of forgetting what it's like to have young children and to know what the pain is now and today.
Mm-hmm.
And I am genuinely worried that American dream will not exist for our 2 sons and their generation unless we do something about it. And I do think Brett is going to take an outsider, because for a long time we have professional politicians in the Republican Party who have been running from something. Now is our moment to start running to something, to our vision of what it means to be an American today. If you have a broken car, you don't turn over the keys to the people who broke it again. You hand it over to a new generation to actually fix the problem. That's why I'm in this race, and we're just getting warmed up.
Confidence, though.
Yes, he is extremely
confident. He's obviously he's energetic. Being born in 1985, he is squarely a millennial, and he's looks like he's calling for generational changeover in leadership. And he's excited. That's something that's very apparent.
Well, you want people to be excited about your campaign and your potential presidency, so you have to be energetic.
I agree.
All right, to you, Governor Haley. So why are you better positioned to turn around this economy that we've heard all of these voters talking about tonight than Mr. Ramaswamy, who is a successful entrepreneur nationally right now? He's beating you in the polls.
Well, I don't care about polls. What I care about, the fact is that no one is telling the American people the truth. The truth is that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us, too. When they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill, they left us with 90 million people on Medicaid, 42 million people on food stamps. No one has told you how to fix it. I'll tell you how to fix it. They need to stop the spending. They need to stop the borrowing. They need to eliminate the earmarks that the Republicans brought back in. And they need to make sure they understand these are taxpayer dollars. It's not their dollars. And while they're all saying this, you have Ron DeSantis, you've got Tim Scott, you've got Mike Pence. They all voted to raise the debt. And Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt. And our kids are never going to forgive us for this. And so at the end of the day, you look at the 2024 budget, Republicans asked for $7.4 billion in earmarks. Democrats asked for $2.8 billion. So you tell me who are the big spenders. I think it's time for an accountant in the White House.
You're an accountant, aren't you?
Yes, and I commend her on her honesty. She didn't toe the party line like, oh, the Democrats, and blamed it all on the Democrats. She, said, hey, some of the people up here with me voted for it.
Right.
Trump, who we all support up here, we took a pledge to support him. He was somewhat responsible for it too. So she was honest. She told the truth. She was the adult in the room at the moment, and I commend her for it.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something that we talk about this often, about the debt limit, and in the national debt, and we've alluded to it in our video that we talked about for the credit downgrade a couple of weeks ago by Fitch, where the United States went from a AAA rating to a AA plus, and the significance of and sometimes it's a boring conversation to talk about the national debt, but eventually the level of debt is going to become so much that the United States' entire economic output is not going to be able to cover the interest payment on the debt. And once that happens, and it will happen eventually because people keep borrowing money, once that happens, we're going to be in a severe crisis, and we're just not going to be able to borrow money anymore. And then the carousel stops, the music stops, the musical chairs. Somebody's going to be left sitting without a chair or standing without a chair. And so it's significant to talk about these billions and trillions of dollars, especially with her saying, you need an accountant in the Oval Office. Whether it's her or not, there does need to be an accountant that's taking care of this.
President Pence, you were mentioned there. 54% of voters say the cost of groceries is a, quote, major problem for them.
Right.
You blamed the Biden administration spending for that increase. But as vice president, your administration spent more than any prior, $7.8 trillion added to the national debt, $3.5 trillion of that before COVID. So does that mean that you're part of the spending problem?
Well, first off, thanks for the question. Thanks for letting me respond to a reference to our administration's record. I'm incredibly proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I mean, in 4 short years, we rebuilt our military. We revived our economy. We unleashed American energy. And we appointed 3 conservatives to the Supreme Court that gave the American people a new beginning for the right to life. Now, Martha, you asked earlier who's the most best prepared for this job. And I must say, with all due respect to all of my friends on the stage, and even to one that's probably looking on, I think unquestionably I am the best prepared, the most tested, the most qualified and proven conservative in this race. I was a leader in the Congress of the United States. I led Indiana where we balanced budgets and had a AAA bond rating when I was governor. And as vice president of the United States, we spent funding to backfill on the military cuts of the Obama administration, and then we were there in the worst pandemic in 100 years. All that being said, I was the first person in this race to say that we've got to deal with the long-term national debt issues. You got people on this stage that won't even talk about issues like Social Security and Medicare. I mean, Vivek, you recently said a president can't do everything. Well, I got news for you, Vivek. I've been in the hallway. I've been in the West Wing. A president of the United States has to confront every crisis facing America. I will put our nation back on the path to growth and prosperity and restore fiscal responsibility, just as I did in Congress and as governor,
Mr. Vice President,
and when I was vice president.
But,
yeah, you
were named earlier. I'm going to give Vivek first.
We'll get to both of them.
This isn't that complicated, guys. Unlock American energy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Put people back to work by no longer paying them more to stay at home. Reform the U.S. Fed, stabilize the U.S. dollar, and go to war. The only war that I will declare as U.S. president will be the war on the federal administrative state that is the source of those toxic regulations acting like a wet blanket on the economy. So I'm not sure I exactly understood Mike Pence's comment, but I'll let you all parse that out. For me, it's pretty simple. That's something a U.S. president can do with focus, and I'll deliver on it.
Well, let me explain it to you. Vivek, if I can. I'll go slower this time.
I sometimes struggle with the reading comprehension.
Look, I was a House conservative leader before it was cool. I actually pushed a Deficit Reduction Act. That was the last time we actually reduced the national debt in the United States when I was the leader of House conservatives. I balanced budgets and cut taxes when I was governor. I mean, look, Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. Now is not the time for on-the-job training. We don't need
Wow.
to bring in a rookie. We don't need
He
to
knew
bring
he
in
was so
people
funny.
without experience. We need to bring
It's quite gracious.
It's 30 seconds when you have a rebuttal, okay? And you are up, Governor DeSantis.
So here's the thing. Why are we in this mess? Part of it, and a major reason, is because how this federal government handled COVID-19 by locking down this economy. It was a mistake. It should have never happened. And in Florida, we led the country out of lockdown. We kept our state free and open. And I can tell you this, as your president, I will never let the deep state bureaucrats lock you down. You don't take somebody like Fauci and coddle him. You bring Fauci in, you sit him down, and you say, Anthony, you are fired.
So, to go back to Vivek, I loved how direct he was, like short to the point on fixing the economy. You got to make money to pay off debt. Yep. And then that's the best way. You keep jobs at home. They pay taxes at home. You produce enough energy to sell overseas. You make money on that. I mean, it's just very direct and to the point to me. And he also likes to mention cutting out bureaucracy, and that does save money. But I think far more money is produced by making our own energy. And then, DeSantis, he mentioned, the reason why we're in this mess is because of the COVID lockdowns. And they were saying earlier, okay, Trump accumulated 7.8 trillion more debt during his presidency. 3 of that was in the first 3 years. And the last year of his presidency was for COVID. So 1 year, that's $4.7 trillion.
Right.
The shots, the vaccines, they had to be paid somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, the big thing, the Operation Warp Speed, in order to get the vaccinations through, I think, don't quote me, I think it's approximately 7 to 12 years for approval for a new drug, and doing computer testing and then animal testing and then human trials and things like that. And
they still come out with side effects.
But this Operation Warp Speed, it literally just proves that if you throw enough money at something, you can get just about anything done. And there's the debate on how much money the pharmaceutical companies made and how much was scammed and what the real costs were. We're not delving into that right now.
But also you had the stimulus payments, to help cover people's missing wages as well. So
right, but I think all the economists have now pointed to that the entire shutdown of the U.S. economy was the wrong move. It was the wrong move, and so. States like Florida that lifted restrictions almost immediately, obviously fared well or fared better than, states that just stayed in complete lockdown.
Also, if people aren't leaving their homes to go out to work, like for the people who did lose their jobs, they're not paying taxes. So that's essentially more money that the government has to borrow.
Right. You mean,
like missing taxes, so like
sales taxes and
sales
fuel
taxes, payroll taxes,
right?
Yeah.
You know what? We're going to bring in.
I just want to finish responding to Mike. I just want to respond to Mike for 1 second because he invoked me back. Listen, now that everybody's gotten their memorized, pre-prepared slogans out of the way, we can actually have a real discussion now. The reality and the fact of the matter is...
Was that one of yours?
Not really, Mike, actually. We're just going to have some fun tonight. And the reality is, you have a bunch of people, professional politicians, super PAC puppets, following slogans handed over to them by their 400-page super PACs last week. The real choice we face in this primary is this. Do you want a super PAC puppet, or do you want a patriot who speaks the truth? Do you want incremental reform, which is what you're hearing about, or do you want revolution?
Okay.
And I stand on the side of the American Revolution.
We're going to take control back here.
We need everyone to have a moment on the economy.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Can I address the
there are
COVID
two
issue
people
that
who
the
have
governor
not.
brought up?
We're going to get back to that. We are. There are two people who we have not heard from yet. So let's hear from Governor Burgum and then from Governor Hutchinson on the economy, sir.
Well, great. Thank you, Martha. And of course, I'm from a town of 300 people. It's a big deal to make it on this stage with all these folks. But when they were all wishing me well, and I think I took them a little too literally when they said, go to Milwaukee and break a leg.
So that's in reference. Earlier that day, he was playing basketball, pickup game basketball with his staff, and got severely injured, tore his Achilles tendon, and had to go to the hospital. And it was unsure whether or not that he was going to be able to make it to the debate stage, which is be absolutely devastating because of the 40,000 individual donors and polling at 1%, and he really pulled out all the stops in order to qualify for the debate. And so if he had gotten taken out just a pickup game of basketball, that would have been tragic for him and his candidacy. But at least he's got a good sense of humor about it.
But I do want to say on this, we're missing something. We can't just talk about the Biden economy because the economy, energy, and national security are all tied together. Of course, we're paying too much for our energy in our state, in our country right now. But part of the reason why is because of the Biden policies on energy. We've got a plan right now, the $1.2 trillion of Green New Deal spending buried in the Inflation Creation Act is something that is just subsidizing China. If we're going to stop buying oil from the Middle East and start buying batteries from China, we're just trading OPEC for Sinopec. And then belatedly, the Biden administration says, no, we're going to put sanctions on Russian oil. Well, we put sanctions on Russian oil, well, then it's 20% off. Who's buying it? China. So if you buy a battery in this country, you buy a solar panel, it's being produced in a plant in China powered by coal, or it's being powered by oil and gas at 20% off. And every farmer in this country would like to buy diesel at 20% off, just like they're buying it in China.
Governor Hutchinson, quickly.
Yeah, that's something that people don't realize, and I think we have it on our schedule to do a full green renewable energy
discussion because it's one of those, it's like a platitude, a buzzword that sounds great, but you need to stop and think, what does it really mean? Where does it come from? Because fairy dust doesn't come out of thin air. It has to be made from something. Yeah, and just as Governor Burgum said, when we import those solar panels, we import the electric batteries that are going in the electric cars from China, the amount of raw ore that is pulled out of the ground in order to get the rare earth minerals and rare earth metals that go into these batteries, and then the chemical washing to get aluminum to be released from the rock, and to get actually access to the aluminum to make it usable. All of that is powered through chemicals and electricity, and China is not running on green energy. China is running on coal plants. In fact, they're just accelerating their building of coal plants. I don't think they have any regulation on the waste they produce, whereas we do, correct? Well, so the even the Paris Climate Accords that President Trump pulled us out of, China and India were allowed to continue to increase their greenhouse gases and their coal plants and things like that, where all the other European and North American countries had to pick up the slack to decrease. And you have to have a level playing field. If the planet is getting warmer because of climate change and greenhouse gases, giving China and India a green light to go ahead and pollute the world more, and we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We truly are. I mean, it's it's kind of tragic, or it's
comedic, I guess. Comedic.
It's a sad comedy drama.
Yeah, that we're doing that. And so, people need to understand where your electric car batteries come from and how devastating to the environment they are. Now, as I've mentioned before, is it an awesome ideal? Yeah, that'd be really cool to have it. But destroying the environment in order to make it better, the juice might not be worth the squeeze.
Yeah, and basically, if you have to subsidize it, it may not be the best idea, because ideas that are truly great, the consumer market will dictate if it's an actual good idea. No one needs to subsidize the iPhone, right?
Right.
Thank you, Brett. Delighted to be here tonight. And let me just tell you that I'm a pro-life governor from a conservative state that have a conservative record in which I lowered taxes in Arkansas as governor. I created a $2 billion surplus that I passed over to my successor, and I made sure that we shrunk the size of government. We have 14% fewer state employees in Arkansas after I left government than when I took over as governor 8 years ago. I tell that because that's what we need in Washington, D.C. We need somebody who can actually constrain the growth of the federal government, that can actually reduce the size, and I've pledged to reduce by 10% our federal non-defense workforce. That's a specific pledge to make that attacks the administrative state. And let me applaud some of the business partners that are here that have had success in business. But let me tell you, I've been a federal prosecutor. I've served our country in terms of being head of the DEA, in Homeland Security, in times of crisis. And while I think that that's experience that is important for the future of our country, to be the president of the United States that can lead with positive solutions and be held accountable.
Thank you. We have a lot of topics to get to, and I promise we're going to get to everyone if we play within the rules. Okay, next topic. More than 1,000 people are still unaccounted for in Maui after the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. Hawaii's governor and White House officials said that climate change amplified the cost of human error.
And a tropical storm hit California for the first time in 84 years. The ocean hit 101 degrees off the coast of Florida. And in the last month, the heat wave in the Southwest broke records nearly 50 years old.
So Alexander Diaz from Young America's Foundation has a question for you.
Polls consistently show that young people's #1 issue is climate change. How will you, as both President of the United States and leader of the Republican Party, calm their fears that the Republican Party doesn't care about climate change?
So we want to start on this with a show of hands. Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Look, we're not school children. Let's have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start. Alexander,
so do you want to raise your hand or not?
I'm glad to see him take control of the stage there. I do want to make a remark about Asa Hutchinson's view on the economy. It was like he gave his whole campaign announcement in one 30-second clip. It's like, okay, good, you're pro-life, but we're talking about the economy.
Right.
Good, you're you enforce, the law, but we're talking about the economy.
Right.
So anyway, you only get 30 seconds. Keep it to the topic, and you get a closing summary at the end. So save it for that.
That's exactly what Ramaswamy said, is that, hey, look, has everybody, gone through their canned prepared remarks already? Let's have a little fun. And Chris Christie obviously asked him, well, was that a prepared remark?
Right.
In order to do that. And so the thing is everybody's going to have these prepared remarks.
Well, yeah, especially if you follow them enough.
Right.
Like Vivek is on a podcast just about every single day, plus he has his own. And so, I try to follow this closely enough so I can tell you some of the ones that he's had.
Right. And, obviously, neither one of us are in politics. We both follow politics, and I followed politics for a very long time. And I don't know exactly what behind the scenes in a campaign actually looks like, unless I've seen it in a movie. But from what I understand, they are grilled and grilled and grilled and grilled and grilled, and these are the potential topics that you need to be prepared on. We've polled your responses with focus groups, and so a lot of these are polished to a T within the confines of the best staff that they have, right?
Well, plus, if you've talked to enough people, you're going to come across some similar concerns.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, DeSantis immediately say, "Look, we're not school children. We're not going to raise our hands. Let's have a debate." That was a pretty good take charge moment. Maybe not as good as Ronald Reagan's "I paid for this microphone," but it's going to be.
It's hard to beat Reagan.
Yeah, it's hard to beat Reagan, but this is going to be right up there, I think, with "Hey, we're not school children. Let's have the debate." I'm more than willing to start, so I'm taking
Good
charge.
on him.
I don't think that's the way to do. So let me just say to Alexander this. First of all, one of the reasons our country's decline is because of the way the corporate media treats Republicans versus Democrats. Biden was on the beach while those people were suffering. He was asked about it. He said no comment. Are you kidding me? As somebody that's handled disasters in Florida, you got to be activated. You've got to be there. You've got to be present. You've got to be helping people who are doing this.
And answer the question?
And here's the deal.
Let's just answer the question.
So is that a yes? Or is that a yes? Is that a hand raise?
You do not.
I think it was a hand raise for him, and it's my hands are in my pockets.
No,
because
no,
the
I
climate
didn't
change
raise-
agenda
I
is
didn't
a
raise a
hoax. Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a
That's
hoax.
just ridiculous.
The climate change agenda is a hoax, and we have to declare independence for it. And the reality is,
I think one of the reasons he said that is, his campaign has raised $16 million from what a report that I read, and he himself loaned his campaign 15 of that $16 million. So that's what he's referring to, that there's not a PAC that's donating money for his campaign. He's largely self-funded it.
Not everyone's wealthy that would.
Yeah, not everybody's wealthy that can do that.
Make a good president, but I think he probably turned off a lot of people in the middle and especially to the left by saying it's a hoax, whether or not you believe it. So
yeah, remember to everybody that's listening to us, not only do you have to win the primary, but then you have to win the general election as well, and so that's going to be a bitter pill, just in my opinion, for the moderates and the left to swallow. So we'll see. We'll see.
You got to convince. You can't just do trigger words.
Oh yeah.
the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy. And so the reality is more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
Governor Haley, are you bought and paid for?
Down by
Hold on.
in the last century.
Listen. Hold on.
I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here. And the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, "What's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here?" was Barack Obama, and I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
Wow.
Give me a hug just like you did to Obama.
The same type of amateur.
And you'll help elect me just like you did to Obama, too. Give me that
the same type of amateur.
Hold on. Governor Haley, would you like to respond? Are you bought and paid for?
What I would like to say is the fact that I think this is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
Boom.
Yes. And I'm sure women everywhere love that. I've heard some more old-fashioned men not care for it as much, but yeah, I agree. Like, okay, the boys are squabbling. Of course, they'll all get into it, I'm sure, at some point.
Right. But still, you know, that was a good breakout mic drop moment right there, and good for her.
First of all, we do care about clean air, clean water. We want to see that taken care of, but there's a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is, first of all, yes, is climate change real? Yes, it is. But if you want to go and really change the environment, then we need to start telling China and India that they have to lower their emissions. That's where our problem.
And that's what we talked about. Yeah, that's what we talked about earlier. You know, the Paris Accords gave China and India a pass, but what good does it do for the world to reduce carbon emissions if they're allowed to ramp up their carbon emissions while everybody else ramps down? You know, I'm just a combat infantryman and not a physicist or a mathematician. But if one group ramps up and a group ramps down, it is neutral. It doesn't go anywhere. You have to say, hey, China, you have to also reduce your carbon emissions as well. And their response is, well, but we're still growing. We're trying to catch up to the rest of the industrialized world. But where are the iPhones being manufactured? Where are the computer chips being manufactured? Where's, you know, electric batteries and solar panels being manufactured? I'd say they have caught up, and they don't need a pass for the next 50 years, which is just going to exacerbate the levels of carbon dioxide and carbon footprint. It's just not fair. So.
And these green subsidies that Biden has put in, all he's done is help China, because he doesn't understand all these electric vehicles that he's done, what that does. Half of the batteries for electric vehicles are made in China. And so that's not helping the environment. You're putting money in China's pocket, and Biden did that. So first of all, I think we need to acknowledge the truth, which is these subsidies are not working. We also need to take on the international world and say, okay, India and China, you've got to stop polluting, and that's when we'll start to deal with
Senator Scott, are you bought and paid for?
Absolutely.
Are you bought and paid for?
I'm sorry?
Are you bought and paid
Absolutely not. I mean, here's what the American people deserve, is a debate about the issues that affect their lives. Going back and forth, being childish, is not helpful to the American people to decide on the next leader of our country. Number one.
Good for him.
Number two, as a kid who grew up in a single-parent household mired in poverty, I wondered, was the American dream real for kids who were devastated by poverty, devastated by the challenges of life? I came to the conclusion that America can do for anyone what she's done for me if we focus on restoring hope, creating opportunities, and protecting America. If we want the environment to be better, and we all do, the best thing to do is to bring our jobs home from China. If we create 10 million new jobs in my Made in America plan, we will have a better economy and a better environment. Let me tell you why I say that, Brett. America,
do it quickly.
America has cut. I'm a Southern boy, I talk slow. So America, that was quick. America has cut our carbon footprint in half in the last 25 years. The places where they are continuing to increase, Africa, 950 million people. India, over 1 billion. China, over 1 billion. Why would we put ourselves at a disadvantage, devastating our own economy? Let's bring our jobs home.
We have a lot of different topics to get to.
Yeah, we do. We thank you all. Thank you, Senator Scott. So coming up next, the candidates will weigh in on what could be a defining issue in the 2024 campaign. The first Republican debate continues moments away.
I mean, that's been exciting so far. This is obviously, I guess they're going to a commercial break, but this has been exciting so far. People are introducing themselves. One thing that didn't happen that I've watched debates in the past is, maybe it's because of the amount of people on there. I think in 2016, when there was, 15, 16
I think it got
candidates.
up to 17.
Yeah, so they had like 2 debates. They had the top tier debate and the bottom tier, and that's when Carly Fiorina won the lower tier and got moved up to the higher tier and things like that as they're going. But I'm beyond certain that in the past people have gotten like a 1-minute introduction and they've gone through. And I didn't see that. They asked a question and they had their prepared statements, but I'm pretty sure that most of the debates that I've seen in the past, and I've been watching them for a while now, everybody gets an opening statement, whether it's 45 seconds or a minute, to kind of introduce themselves, and then they roll into the questions. And interestingly, the very first question was asked to Ron DeSantis, and he then answered. Well, he did his prepared speech, and then answered the question, and I think that was a missed opportunity for everybody to at least get their 1 minute right at the get-go, because obviously we're seeing some of the people not getting as much airtime already.
Right.
So anyway, I think that was just a missed opportunity for Fox to get everybody to introduce themselves.
Abortion has been a losing issue for Republicans since the Dobbs decision. In 6 state referendums, all have upheld abortion rights in this country. And even in red states, there are more swing state referendums that are coming up as we head into the elections as well on this. So, Governor Haley, what do you say to your party and to your state, which today confirmed a 6-week abortion law as well, especially the impact on women suburban voters across this country?
Thank you, Martha. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children, so I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, we need to stop demonizing this issue. This is talking about the fact that unelected justices didn't need to decide something this personal, because it's personal for every woman and man. Now it's been put in the hands of the people. That's great. When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion? Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is, and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
Brett,
You're not mentioned, Vice President Pence. Governor DeSantis, you signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. One of your biggest financial backers said that you need to, quote, shift to get moderates or you will lose. What do you say to him and others who say politically that is a tough thing to sell nationally?
Well, I would say we sold the biggest election landslide victory in the history of the Republican Party in the state of Florida in 2022. That's what I did. We can win. But second of all, look, you got to do what you think is right. I believe in a culture of life. I was proud to sign the heartbeat bill. I remember one of the most impactful moments of my life was when I heard the heartbeat of my oldest daughter in my wife's womb, and then saw the sonograms of all 3 of my kids. What the Democrats are trying to do on this issue is wrong, to allow abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. I know a lady in Florida named Penny. She survived multiple abortion attempts. She was left discarded in a pan. Fortunately, her grandmother saved her and brought her to a different hospital. We're better than what the Democrats are selling. We are not going to allow abortion all the way up till birth, and we will hold them accountable for their extremism.
But just to be clear, Governor, would you sign a 6-week ban federally?
I'm going to stand on the side of life. Look, I understand Wisconsin is going to do it different than Texas. I understand Iowa and New Hampshire are going to do different. But I will support the cause of life as governor and as president.
Vice President Pence, you're shaking your head. Hold on, Senator. Vice President Pence, you're shaking your head.
Well, look, I'm not new to this cause. After I gave my life to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I opened up the book and I read, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And see, I set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life." And I knew from that moment on, the cause of life had to be my cause. And I've been a champion for life in the Congress, a champion for life as governor and as vice president. And to be honest with you, Nikki, you're my friend, but consensus is the opposite of leadership. When the Supreme Court returned this question to the American people, they didn't just send it to the states only. It's not a states only issue, it's a moral issue. And I promise you, as President of the United States, the American people will have a champion for life in the Oval Office. Can't we have a minimum standard in every state in the nation that says when a baby is capable of feeling pain, an abortion cannot be allowed? A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come. It's supported by 70% of the American people, but it's going to take unapologetic leadership that stands on principle and expresses compassion for women in crisis pregnancies. I'll do that as President of the United States.
He called my name, so I want to respond to that.
30 seconds.
So first of all, I will say it is in the hands of the people, and that's where it should be. But when you're talking about a federal ban, be honest with the American people. We haven't had 45 pro-life senators in over 100 years. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president could ban all those state laws. Don't make women feel like they have to decide on this issue when you know we don't have 60 Senate votes in the House.
70% of the American people support legislation
but
to ban
70%
abortion
of the
after a
Senate
baby is
does
capable
not.
of experiencing pain.
And that's critical. That's a critical statement. Haley is being a realist.
Yeah.
She's not being a glass half empty, half full. She's recognizing that there's a glass and there's water in it. And the reason that government moves so slowly is because we don't want to have these giant
knee-jerk reactions
and pendulum
you're just pulled
swings
all over the place all the time.
Exactly. It would just literally what's the poll say now, and we'll just completely shift the whole country one way. It happens slowly for a reason, and so that's why it's so important when you go out and vote that you try and get a candidate that checks as many boxes as you can, because there's nobody that's going to fit for everybody,
unless it's yourself.
Unless it's yourself, that you're always going to fit in your own. You're going to check all your boxes. But she's being very realistic and saying it doesn't matter what you want to happen. Reality is, but what can you get done?
That's closer to what you want.
Exactly.
And so he's been in politics forever. He should know that consensus is not leadership. She's trying to move the needle in the direction that she wants. She would prefer, no abortions whatsoever, but she understands what is possible.
Yeah, what can be done. And I know everybody wants to say, look, as president, I can do everything. And
You're
the answer,
one man.
There's and oh, by the way, just as a civics lesson to everybody, there are 3 branches of government. so the other 2 have a say in what goes on. And again, that's designed on purpose to prevent these giant swings from happening. But anyway, I think she's holding her own against Pence. I think, actually not holding her own. I retract that. I think she's getting the better of Mike on this exchange.
Leadership. Hold on. 70% of the Senate does not. You have to be honest with the American people.
We have to have a 15-week limit.
Let's get Governor Bergman for one minute here. But the Supreme Court did overturn Roe v. Wade. And the result of that decision was that it went back to the states. So that's where it is right now. So as I understand it, you are not in favor of a federal ban. What do you say about the states? There's about 5 of them, including New Jersey, I think a few others, that allow abortion up until the time of birth, though. If you were president, would you be able to abide that?
Well, first of all, I'm a pro-life governor of a very pro-life state. And this issue is, of course, very important. But I am on the record, and I stand behind that we should not have a federal abortion ban. We should not. And the reason why we shouldn't is very simple. It's the 10th Amendment in the Constitution. In the Constitution, which the states created the federal government, not the other way around, it says that there were certain duties allowed to the federal government delegated to them by the states. The rest are left to the states, or importantly, or to the people. We need to get back to freedom and liberty for the people in this country. And we can't have Republicans who fight for 50 years for this great cause and to return it back to the states. And then the next day they turn around and go, no, the feds should do that, because the feds are stepping into people's lives. They're stepping into people's businesses. over and over. If we say that the Fed should be in on this one, where do we stop? I say that we follow the Constitution, and this is returned to the states. This is where it should be.
But Governor Burgum, you signed a 6-week ban. Time out. You signed a 6-week ban. Governor Burgum, you signed a 6-week ban. So you're saying federally, it's all going to go to the states.
Yes, and what is going to work in New York will never work in North Dakota, and vice versa. That's
Governor
why we have 50
Asa
states.
Hutchinson,
That's why
right
we have
here.
50 states.
This is too important of an issue that I have to address. First of all, the Supreme Court gave it back to the elected representatives, whether it's the states or whether it's the United States Congress.
That's
so
right.
there is authority, and that's why President Biden is pushing for a Democrat proposal, which is, in essence, abortion on demand through the term. So they have their extreme position at a national level. It's most likely going to be addressed in the states, but it's certainly fine for it to be addressed at the national level as well. Arkansas has the record of being the most pro-life state in the nation. I signed 30 pro-life pieces of legislation while I was governor. And every state can determine a different outcome here. And it is the most important issue for women and for the unborn child and for our country that we get this right. It's going to be a continued debate. Let's talk about it in terms of compassion, in terms of protecting the life, and also understanding how we have to enhance adoption services, how we have to enhance maternal care. Those things we've done in Arkansas and are important for our nation's future.
There are a lot of issues that are very important. Senator, I'll let you weigh in.
We cannot let states like California, New York, and Illinois have abortions on demand up until the day of birth. That is immoral. It is unethical. It is wrong. We must have a president of the United States who will advocate and fight for, at the minimum, a 15-week limit. I am 100% pro-life conservative. I have 100% pro-life record. I got to tell you, though, we must fight for life. Our Declaration of Independence says our Creator gave us inalienable rights that include life. That is a list. That is an issue we must solve. We can't leave it to Illinois. We can't leave it to Minnesota. We can't leave it to Illinois. We must solve that issue with a 15-week limit at a minimum.
Brett, I think we're all pro-life, but what I would love is for someone to ask Biden and Kamala Harris, are they for 38 weeks? Are they for 39 weeks? Are they for 40 weeks? Because that's what the media needs to be asking.
All right, another issue is America and the crime crisis, the homelessness crisis. American cities are in decline. People are moving out as homelessness, drugs, crime move in. There are problems accelerated. They did accelerate during the pandemic and are still rising, actually.
Murders in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, all up 30% between 2019 and 2022. Homelessness is up 11%, the largest jump in recorded history. Vice President Pence, a lot of this began in the COVID era. How much of what we're seeing happening?
And just recently, in talking about homelessness, it was last week, the mayors of New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles came here to Houston, Texas, to talk to Mayor Sylvester Turner to see how Houston has addressed the homeless crisis here. And all of the things that we have done. If you may or may not know, Houston is the fourth largest city in the United States population-wise. So you have New York, L.A., Chicago, and then Houston. And so being in the top 5 largest cities of the U.S. and to have such a low homelessness problem, Mayor Turner, explained to the other mayors what Houston was doing, and there's over 6,000 partnerships with charities, local charities, that are unified.
And we're a lot closer to Mexico, by the way.
Yeah.
And is Houston a sanctuary city?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Where it's
but
declared.
We do have signs saying no camping on public property allowed. So I think that helps as well.
Right. Yep. But that's interesting that that those big cities came to Houston in order to learn, and they were all excited. I read the news article, and they were all excited to get here and see what's happening. And the a problem is we don't have as large of a homelessness problem as the other cities do. But you can scale what we're doing here in Houston, and so hopefully we can get some of this addressed.
Around this country is a result of those COVID lockdowns, and is your administration in part to blame for how we got here?
Well, I think what's in part to blame is the Democrats been talking about defunding the police for the last 5 years. And we ought to be funding law enforcement, particularly in our major cities, at unprecedented levels. I mean, it's extraordinary to think about the violence that's claiming innocent lives literally every week in every major city in this country. And yet Democrats and liberal prosecutors in major metropolitan areas continue to work out their fanciful agendas, to do bail reform and go easy. What we need is strong commitment to law enforcement. We need leadership in Washington, D.C. that'll marshal the resources of the states, marshal the resources of the American people. But let me also say it's about opportunity. I mean, a lot of people don't know that those Trump-Pence tax cuts that we got signed into law go away at the end of 2025 if we don't have a Republican president and a Republican House and a Republican Senate. When I'm president of the United States, we're actually going to cut taxes further. We're going to extend those tax cuts, and we're going to close the Federal Department of Education, block grant all that funding back to the states. With a growing economy and educational choice and law enforcement, we will bring our cities back.
Governor Christie, another issue. This weekend here in Milwaukee, reports say there were 30 shootings, and a number of them including kids. Add that to the big increase in school shootings around the country. Democrats blame this crisis on easy access to guns. They also blame Republicans for blocking gun control legislation. What would President Christie do?
You know, I'm proud of the fact, Brett, that I'm the only person along with Governor Hutchinson up on this stage who's actually running United States Attorney's Office. I ran the 5th largest office in America in a state where there is significant urban crime. And the problem is not going to be solved by more money. The problem is that these prosecutors in these localities in the states are refusing to do their job and to arrest violent criminals. So what a President Christie would do is appoint an attorney general who would instruct each of the 93 U.S. attorneys that they are to take over the prosecution of violent crime in every one of those cities that are failing to do so. We have plenty of room in the federal prisons to lock up these violent criminals and clean up what's going on all across this country in these individual cities. Secondly, what we need to make sure that each and every one of these criminals understand is that the laws apply to everybody. And when Hunter Biden fills out a fake application, a false application for a gun permit, and then is facing a 10-year mandatory minimum, which was mandated by legislation sponsored by his father, and then you have a Justice Department that walks away from those charges, we're telling people that the law doesn't apply to everybody. In a Christie administration, he would go to jail for 10 years.
What about a President Ramaswamy? What is a President Ramaswamy?
Now, one of the things, you know, filling out the gun form when you're doing your background check, one of the questions, you know, are you abusing a narcotic substance? And so by him marking no on there, he falsified his sworn affidavit in order to do the background check for a firearm. And so that's what he's referring to. And we've seen it in the news where there was a plea deal that was going to happen where he was going to Hunter Biden was going to plead guilty on not paying his income taxes for 2 counts, and he was going to get a dismissal or an immunity for the gun charge. You know, when they went in to finalize that deal, the whole thing fell apart because he's also being investigated for additional federal crimes, and he thought that immunity was going to go like in perpetuity. And so he immediately pled not guilty. So he was about to plead guilty, and then he changed it to not guilty. But still, he did lie and falsify his gun background check form. And so, because he was on addicted to cocaine at the time, and so that was false. But anyway, that's what Governor Christie is referring to.
Do about guns.
So the reality is we have a crime wave in this country, and we know how to fix it. The question is, do we actually have the spine to do it? More cops in the streets who are on the streets able to do their jobs without looking over their shoulder for getting sued. And we also have a mental health epidemic in this country. Just over the same period that we have closed mental health institutions, we have seen a spike in violent crime. Do we have the spine to bring them back? I think we should. As president, I will. But it's not just drugging up people in those psychiatric institutions with Zoloft and Seroquel. It's a deeper issue. I think faith-based approaches can play a role here, too. We're in the middle of a national identity crisis. And I say this as a member of my generation. The problem in our country right now, the reason we have that mental health epidemic, is that people are so hungry for purpose and meaning at a time when family, faith, patriotism, hard work have all disappeared. What we really need is a tonal reset from the top, saying that this is what it means to be an American. Yes, we will stand for the rule of law. Yes, we will close the southern border where criminals are coming in every day. And yes, we will back law enforcement because we remember who we really are. And that's also how we address that mental health epidemic in the next generation that is directly leading to violent crime across this country.
Governor DeSantis, really quickly. Governor DeSantis.
We don't have an identity crisis, Vivek. We're not looking for a new national identity. The American people are the most faith-filled, freedom-loving, idealistic, hardworking people the world has ever known. We just need government as good as our people.
Well, Mike, I think the difference is you might have, some others like you may have on the stage, it's Morning in America speech. It is not Morning in America. We live in a dark moment, and we have to confront the fact that we're in an internal, sort of cold cultural civil war.
And we have to recognize the American people with the failed government in Washington, D.C. We just need government as good as our people again.
So let me just finish addressing that slogan, because I don't know what that slogan means. We need to shut down the administrative state. That's actually how we translate it.
Crime has been on the rise in Florida, Governor DeSantis. How do you stop crime?
Well, actually, crime's at a 50-year low in Florida. We're happy with that. Well, the statewide, it's a 50-year low. And so here's the thing. These hollowed out cities, this is a symptom of America's decline. And one of the biggest reasons is because you have George Soros funding these radical left-wing district attorneys. They get into office and they say they're not going to prosecute crimes they disagree with. The inmates start running the asylum. There's one guy in this entire country that's ever done anything about that. Me. When we had two of these district attorneys in Florida elected with Soros funding who said they wouldn't do their job, I removed them from their posts. They are gone. And as president, we are going to go after all of these people because they are hurting the quality of life and they are victimizing innocent people in every corner of this country, and it will stop when I get into office.
Okay, one more here before the break, Governor Brogan.
Brett and Martha, I just thought it was interesting. You asked your question about the problems we're having in big cities. Nobody ever asked the question of what about the crime wave in small towns? Because in a small town, neighbors help neighbors. People understand each other. If a farmer gets sick, everybody comes together and helps him get the crop off. There's accountability. There's transparency. One thing that I think this country could use is somebody in the White House that understands small town values, because that's our road back to get this country on track again.
But how would he do that as president? It doesn't really say.
Yeah. I mean, I think what he was getting at was that, maybe going back to Haley's consensus, hey, we're all going to be helping each other. I mean, it's an idealistic position to take, but I agree with you. What does that mean?
Yeah, what would he do to support that? And then back to Vivek's comment about the mental institutions with faith-based approaches, which I agree with, but wouldn't that be a conflict with separation of church and state, since it would probably be a state-funded institution? That's
a really deep question, and my position on the separation of church and state, when you look at the Establishment Clause for the First Amendment, that there will not be a national religion, and again the reason, in my opinion, looking at the Federalist Papers and looking at historical context, that the Church of England. Remember, we fought a Revolutionary War to secede and to break away from the United Kingdom. The Church of England supplanted Catholicism early on. I think at least 300 years prior, when we're looking at the founding of our country, and it had a legitimate role in the government, and so. The Establishment Clause and the separation of church and state was that there was not going to be a Church of America that was going to coincide with President Washington as a co-equal. And so I think that to have faith-based institutions that pick up some slack, whether they so the debate would be whether they could be funded by taxes, right? And there are private schools that receive federal funding that are religious-based schools. So there is historical context that a school could receive federal funding. Then I don't see why a faith-based mental health would be able to receive federal funding, but on the by and by, most of those are 501c nonprofits, and so they would be generating donations and things like that. And just because an entity is a nonprofit doesn't mean they don't make a profit, right? Right. And so it just means they don't have to pay taxes on it. But I think there would be more appetite for even regular citizens, wealthy citizens, corporate America, the federal government, to help solve the problem, because we need people that are solutions based, not limited by what can be done. It's kind of when I was an officer in the Army, and now even more so as a business owner. How do we get to yes? Don't take no for an answer. How do we get to yes? Now it needs to be moral, ethical, and legal, but how do we get to yes? And that is the people that can get to yes and figure out how to surround themselves with people that can help them get to yes. Those are the people that are going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Governor Hutchinson? As former head of the DEA, I understand the drug crisis in America. And right now, whenever you look at the challenges in our inner city, there's three simple words that would be helpful. One, enforce the law when it comes to crime. Secondly, let's deal with the challenge of fentanyl. And it's both about stopping the fentanyl coming from Mexico, but it's also about education of our young people, making sure that we have the tools that are needed for addiction counseling. That's what we expanded in Arkansas as well. Whenever you look at the underlying challenge of America, though, no one likes to see an America with smash and grab in our inner cities. As President of the United States, that will stop. It starts at the top with the respect for our justice system that a former president who's under indictment has undermined by attacking judges, by attacking prosecutors, by attacking the system and saying he's aggrieved. And so we have to have respect for our justice system and the rule of law, and it starts at the top with the President of the United States.
Brett,
Thank you.
Hold on. Take a break.
Brett.
So, speaking of that, right now you are looking live at Fulton County Jail, where former President Donald Trump will be processed tomorrow. So next, the candidates will have an opportunity to talk about the coming trials of Donald Trump.
Well, that's the end of the second segment. I think we've had a lot of good dialogue back and forth.
Right.
People are obviously jockeying for position. I'm surprised that there are more people are not jockeying for more airtime. I'd be interested to see the numbers of who got how many minutes, X minutes, and stuff like that, because Governor Burgum, he's only had 3 opportunities during the first 45 minutes to talk, and he had a minute and maybe 30 seconds each time.
I know in one of Megyn Kelly's podcasts, she listed how much speaking time each candidate got, and I was really surprised that Burgum had like 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah,
because it didn't feel like it.
Well, each of those times he was called on, he got a 1-minute answer. So that's 3 right there, and I don't think he used all of his time because I didn't hear a lot of dings to remind him. So we'll see how much he gets, throughout the rest of it. But 6 minutes seems because I know they get a closing statement, so 6 minutes could very well be what. But that's not a lot of time in something that was 2 hours long.
Well, especially that many subjects.
Yeah, and that many subjects. He just didn't get called upon. But now it makes sense. Before we get comments below, it makes sense that the people that are on the very bottom of just making the debate shouldn't get all the airtime that we want to hear from the candidates that have 10, 7, 6, 5% of the polling numbers, rather than somebody who just made the cut to get in. So I got it, but this is one of those things where you're trying to introduce yourself to the nation, and you got to put yourself out there. You got to be a little bit aggressive.
Well, also, hit the campaign trail hard, and not just news outlets, podcasts. Like I said, Vivek seems to be on every podcast I've even heard of.
Right.
And twice on Sunday.
Okay. Well, let's go. We'll now start the third segment.
Well, we have a lot to get to in this second hour of this GOP primary debate. Policy discussions the Americans want to hear you all on. China, Ukraine, immigration, education. But we are going to take a brief moment and talk about the elephant not in the room.
Former President Trump has been indicted in 4 different states on 91 counts. He will be processed tomorrow in Georgia at the Fulton County Jail for charges relating to the 2020 election loss.
You all signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
I just want to point out, start looking at the middle and then going out towards the sides. Ramaswamy immediately shot his hand up.
Right. I do hate that for DeSantis that he looked around, because you had to have known the question was coming. You had to have known that the 800-pound gorilla not in the room was going to be addressed, and what your thoughts were, and that's a basic thought. So should not need to look around the room.
Yeah, I thought
that looks really bad.
I thought that did look really bad for him to look left and right.
I think it's better to keep your hand down than to look around.
Because one of the things that you're looking for is decisiveness.
Exactly, and he's been decisive on so many things, but
Ramaswamy immediately shot up.
Yep.
Haley shot up. Scott shot up. Burgum shot up.
But the other side of the stage. I mean, DeSantis looked around left and right to see who was holding their hand up, and Pence was one of the last ones to hold it up. And what did Christie do?
Christie did a little finger wave.
Like, no.
Yeah, I don't know. But Asa Hutchinson, no go.
Just hold on. So just to be clear, Governor Christie, you were kind of late to the game there, but you raised your hand.
No, I'm doing this. Look, I'm doing this.
And I know you didn't.
Whoa. No. What's the look? Here's the bottom line. Someone's got to stop normalizing this conduct. Okay? Now, and Now, whether or not you believe that the criminal charges are right or wrong, the conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States.
It sounds about 50-50, boo.
Yeah.
And you know, this is the great thing about this country. Booing is allowed, but it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the truth.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you raised your hand supporting...
No, I'd like to get in and respond. Let's just speak the truth, okay? President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Chris Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against
might be one of the best lines of the night.
And if people at home want to see a bunch of people blindly bashing Donald Trump without an iota of vision for this country, they could just change the channel to MSNBC right now. But I'm not running for president of MSNBC. I am running for president of the United States. We're skating on thin ice, and we cannot set a precedent where the party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents. It is wrong. We have to end the weaponization of justice in this country.
30 seconds, Governor DeSantis.
Look, you know, let me tell you
No, I'm sorry. 30 seconds, Governor
You
Christie.
make me laugh because you sit here in an answer. You sit here in an answer right. Hold on one second. You sit here in an answer.
Go ahead, Governor Christie.
Hold on, Governor Christie.
Hold on.
Well, so listen, the more time we spend doing this, the less time they can talk about issues you want to talk about. So let's just get through this section. Governor Christie.
You sit here talking about how you want to stand up for the rule of law.
Yes.
And law and order. And the fact is that it can't be selective. In your book, you had much different things to say about Donald Trump than you're saying here tonight.
That's not true.
Well, it is very true.
That is not
true. It's very true. I read it,
because
and I
there's
know.
a difference
Look,
between
I
bad behavior and illegal behavior, Chris. And you, as a prosecutor, should know better.
Yeah, you know what? I know a lot better.
There's a difference between bad behavior.
And I know a lot better than you do. You've never done it like you've never done anything to try to advance the interests of this government except to put yourself forward as a candidate tonight. And here's the thing. We've stood up for law and order. I did it as U.S. attorney. I did it as governor. And I am not going to bow to anyone when we have a president of the United States who disrespects the Constitution. He said,
Get your MSNBC contributor.
he said,
these are politicized indictments,
Martha,
and we have to call out the truth.
Martha, it's important to say that the president said, Donald Trump said, it's okay to suspend the Constitution. Now, the oath you take is to preserve, protect, and defend, not suspend. I will always stand up for our Constitution, regardless of the political pressure.
Right, we have another question for you. We're going to get everyone in on this issue, but I have another question. Hold on, you will. All right, so President Trump's former vice president is on this stage tonight. He has faced hecklers on the campaign trail over his actions on January the 6th. On that day, the vice president moved forward with the certification of the election. So do you believe that Mike Pence did the right thing?
So let's make sure we take that into context. So his duties and responsibilities were to certify the electors and to count the Electoral College ballots. And it is widely held that that process is a ceremonial process, and that it was not, something that could be overturned or to shape the election, just throw out, a state's envelope and then grab another envelope from another state. Now, Congress has worked. I'm not quite sure if it passed, but I know they were working to codify that it is a ceremonial position. And that
only ceremonial,
but it has been widely held as a precedent as being ceremonial. So, but that's what they're referring to on January 6th when Vice President Pence was, as president of the Senate, was in there and conducting the business for the Electoral College.
Senator Scott, do you believe he did the right thing?
Absolutely. He did the right thing. Number one. Number two, we should be asking ourselves a bigger question about the weaponization of the Department of Justice. When I'm president, the first thing I'll do is fire Merrick Garland. Second thing I'll do, fire Christopher Wray, because we need Lady Justice to wear a blindfold. Without that, no one has confidence in our justice system. 17% of Republicans have confidence in our Department of Justice. Here's why. We keep seeing not only the weaponization of the Department of Justice against political opponents, but also against parents who show up at school board meetings. They're called, under this DOJ, they're called domestic terrorists.
Firing Christopher Wray,
but that's not
shut down the FBI. Actually have the courage to get it right.
Mr. Ramaswamy, let me finish my comments.
Yes.
Not only that, in addition to that, we see the SWAT team show up at pro-life activist homes with guns drawn because this DOJ uses their power, uses their authority, not just against political opponents, but against conservatives and conservative causes. It is time for a change in America, and I will bring that change to the greatest nation on God's green earth.
We have an important
But Governor
question
DeSantis, do you believe that Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th?
So here's what we need to do. We need to end the weaponization.
Yes or no, Governor DeSantis? Yes or no, and then expand.
Yeah, and he's not the only one guilty of this. But yes, if they ask you a yes or no question, say yes or no, whichever the case is, and then go into why. And then, if you want to do your life story, because you only get 30 seconds, so be direct.
Yes or no.
Plus, people have short attention spans.
And then expand.
Yeah.
Of these federal agents.
But that's not
I
the
will do
question.
that.
That's not the question.
I know, but here's the thing. This election is not about January 6th of 2021. It's about January 20th of 2025 when the next president
I
is
agree.
Take office.
Yes, but say yes or no first, and then make your excellent
They
point.
want to talk about all these other issues, but we've got to focus on your future. We've got to focus on reversing the decline of our country. I learned in the military, I was assigned with U.S. Navy SEALs in Iraq, that you focus on the mission above all else. You can't get distracted. So Republicans, we've got to look forward, and we've got to make sure that we're bringing the message that can win in November 2021.
Do not answer the question. Do not answer the question.
Vice President Pence, what do you think, Vice President?
So I also want to just bring up real quick that's a big thing that he he is a Navy veteran. He was an attorney, so a JAG.
The only veteran.
He's the only veteran. But he was a judge advocate group, JAG lawyer that was attached to a Navy SEAL unit. And typically when an attorney in the Army has them as well at the brigade level, and above, but the lowest level they go to is a brigade level, and they provide legal advice to the brigade commander. Hey, look, we're going to attack this village. Hey, sir, the rules of land warfare state this, and this, and so you need to make sure that you take this into consideration when you're looking at doing this. So I just want to make sure when he says he was attached to Navy SEALs, he was a lawyer that was attached to a Navy SEAL unit providing legal advice to the commanders of that unit. So I just want to make sure that when people talk about what his military experience is, so he proudly served in the Navy, and he is the only veteran and combat veteran because that was in combat. So good on him.
Defend the Constitution of the United States. I think the American people deserve to know whether everyone on this stage agrees that I kept my oath to the Constitution that day. There's no more important duty. So answer the question.
I've answered this before.
So yes.
Why are we? Mike did his duty. I got no beef with him. But here's the thing: is this what we're going to be focusing on going forward? The rehashing of this? I'll tell you,
Governor
the
DeSantis,
Democrats would love that, and they will win if we let him get away with it. I'm not letting Biden hang out in the basement this time. We're going to run him ragged around this country, and we're going to hold him accountable.
Let me just say, Governor DeSantis, we spent an hour talking about policy. Former President Trump is beating you by 30, 40 points in many polls. So it is a factor in the GOP primary. Governor Hutchinson, you did not raise your hand.
I did not raise my hand because there's an important issue we as a party have to face. And over a year ago, I said that Donald Trump was morally disqualified from being president again as a result of what happened on January 6th. More people are understanding the importance of that, including conservative legal scholars who says he may be disqualified under the 14th Amendment from being president again.
Now, Kimberly, what were the requirements in order to make it on the debate stage?
Well, one of the requirements was you would support whoever the candidate is.
Right. So it's not. I believe the question was
so
that
even
asked,
if it is Trump, even if he is convicted.
Right. So the question
yes or no.
they asked specifically was, if Trump is the nominee, would you support him? And I believe they all had to sign a pledge not to support Donald Trump, but whoever the candidate was.
Whether or not it is Trump, whether or not they are convicted. So this should automatically disqualify him from the stage. Now, I don't like that essentially he lied to get on the stage, but at least he's not lying now. But
right.
And also the 14th Amendment, I mean, that for some reasons people are confused about the 14th Amendment, but that was for post-Civil War era.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if you're looking and you're trying to say that you were part of an insurrection, I mean, you'd have to go all the way back to the Capitol Hill, protest where they declared themselves an autonomous zone. If you're saying, we are our own entity away from the United States, is that secession from the United States? Are those people guilty of treason? I would say that would be true. They're saying, look, we no longer recognize anybody, any local services, state services, or federal services. We are our own entity and set up our own loose government. So that could be there. The trial has not happened for any of the trials. So he's got 4 arrests with over 100 indictments talking about Trump, and he hasn't been convicted of anything. So
right.
In the United States, which is semi-unique in a lot of parts of the world, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. France, it's the opposite. You're presumed guilty until you prove your innocence. So that's something that that's not completely rare, but it is a little unique that the United States has, that you're presumed innocent. So saying that Trump is presumed innocent, we haven't had any trials yet. So can he be disqualified from serving for what? He hasn't been convicted of anything yet.
Right, even if the 14th Amendment did apply.
Right. So I don't know why he's bringing that up, but he is an attorney. He a lot of smart people. There's a lot of intellectual horsepower that's on that stage. And I am not an attorney, and this is not legal advice. And I did not stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night. so I'm but I have common sense. And so I understand the law a little bit. I was a criminal justice major in college, and so I have a Bachelor of Science in criminal justice, so that I'm able to understand a lot of this. But I don't think that the argument that he's making is going to hold as much water as he thinks it is.
As a result of the insurrection, this is something that could disqualify him.
Plus, insurrection, the government was still the Trump administration when this happened. So there was not an overthrow of the government.
He's going to overthrow himself.
He's overthrowing himself. Now if Joe Biden had taken over and done the oath of office, and now it's the Biden administration, and there was I'm not an attorney, but I'm just a common sense guy, but to have an insurrection to overthrow the current government, which was the Trump administration. So I don't know if people have thought about that. There was, how do you overthrow yourself when it's still your administration in power? Now, there are charges of obstructing Congress, obstructing formal business of the United States government. I got it. That they did do that.
Well, he said protest peacefully. He did not say break into the Capitol.
Well, yeah, and so we're not going to rehash that part. But the big thing is he's talking about insurrection and applying the 14th Amendment. So again, the Trump administration was still in power, and they were not overthrowing the Trump administration, which was the government in charge at the time. So I don't know if that's ever been brought up as a constitutional argument or not. But again, Hutchinson's making an argument, which is what attorneys do.
Under our rules and under the Constitution. And so, obviously, I'm not going to support somebody who's been convicted of a serious felony or who is disqualified under our Constitution. And that's consistent with RNC rules. And I hope everybody would agree with me.
We're going to move on. No, we're going to.
Martha, can I answer the question?
Can I get in on that?
Okay, I'd like to answer.
I've already been in on it, Vice President Pence.
All right, I'd like to answer the question you asked and not give a pre-canned speech. Mike Pence stood for the Constitution, and he deserves not grudging credit. He deserves our thanks as Americans for putting his oath of office and the Constitution of the United States before personal, political, and unfair pressure. And
that's what everybody's supposed
to do.
Everybody's
supposed
to do that.
Before we can move on to the issues that Ron talked about, is we have to dispense with the person who said that we need to suspend the Constitution to put forward his political career. Mike Pence said no, and he deserves credit for it.
Okay. Governor Haley, we haven't heard from you on this. Do you agree that Vice President Pence did the right thing that day or not?
I do think that Vice President Pence did the right thing, and I do think that we need to give him credit for that. But what I will also tell you is, look, I mean, when it comes to whether President Trump should serve or not, I trust the American people. Let them vote. Let them decide. But what they will tell you is that it is time for a new generational conservative leader. We have to look at the fact that 3/4 of Americans don't want a rematch between Trump and Biden. And we have to face the fact that Trump is the most disliked politician in America. We can't win a general election that way.
And we've already talked about this a few times.
Right. Finally, someone says yes or no.
Right.
But, yeah, she's just laying down facts. Now, you may not want to hear them, may not like them, but they're facts.
Right. I mean, the vast majority of the population does not want to see a rematch with Biden and Trump. And, and
neither one want to debate. I'm like, I want to see a debate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's Trump's rationale is why should he get on the stage? Because he's so far ahead of everybody. The only thing that could happen was people would pick on him and attack him. And so now they're having to attack each other.
Well, I like that he's not here for this one. That way they can get their ideas out there without someone there to suck the oxygen out of the room. And plus they would have less time because it would be one more person.
Sure.
But also he would generate such a response from the crowd with the cheers and the boos and whatnot that really no points would get across.
Right.
So for this one, I am glad he's not there. But I mean, if it were to come down to Biden and Trump, would there be a debate?
Oh yeah, there definitely would be. I think definitely there would be a debate because I don't think Trump. Again, I'm not on his campaign staff. I'm not on anybody's campaign staff, but I don't think Trump would pass up the opportunity to try and befuddle Biden on the stage, either by talking quickly or asking questions himself. His standard attack, scorched earth style that he has, but Haley is just speaking the truth. Look, we're all having a discussion on the primary. But we have to, as soon as the primary is done, we have to transition into the general election. And this is just facts. The vast majority of Americans don't want to see Donald Trump as a president again. And you
whether
know,
or not you love him or hate him, that's what other people
right.
feel.
And so that's what polling says. Now polls aren't always 100%.
No. Plus, it's early.
It's early, but you know, there was a poll of 12, a focus group of 12 Democrats, and they were asked whether or not they thought President Biden was doing a good job, and the answer was no, 100%, 12 for 12, no, he's not doing a good job. Then the question, you know, what do you think he should run for president again? Yes or no? And the answer is no. He should not run for president again. In a rematch of Trump versus Biden, who would you vote for? 12 for 12 said Biden. I mean, so even though they recognize that he's a terrible president, they recognize that he should not run.
They hate Trump so much.
They're going to vote for Biden anyway.
They will crawl over broken glass set on fire to make sure Trump is not elected. So
I mean, she's just speaking facts. You know, they have to get to the general election, and you have to be forward thinking on that.
Governor Bergen.
It's Governor Bergen, opportunity.
Happy to answer the question. Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th. But I would say you started off the top of this hour saying we're going to talk about China, Ukraine, education. We are. China is the number one threat to our country. And every minute that these 8 candidates spend talking about the past instead about the future is time that is just you know who loves it? Biden loves it, but China loves it when we're talking about the past.
Good on him.
Yep.
As promised,
Amen.
we were going to spend a few questions on it, let people say what they wanted to say. And now, indeed, we are moving on to the subject.
The U.S. has committed nearly 77.
Can I speak on this issue? I was
You
kind of
did
involved.
you answered on this.
You did.
You did
say
answer.
something.
Yeah.
We thought you were done, but you
No, I
please.
wasn't done.
Well, Mike, why don't you say this? Join me in making a commitment that on day one you would pardon Donald Trump. I'm the only candidate on the stage who had the courage to actually say it. That is how we move our nation forward.
I don't know
and
why
turn the
you
page
assume that
forward. That's
Donald
exactly
Trump
right.
will be convicted of these crimes.
You should be able to make a commitment. The same justice system that was this
Vivek,
corrupt.
Here's the difference between you and me.
Yeah, I'm not a professional politician. That's the difference. Who can answer a question?
I've actually given pardons when I was governor of the state of Indiana. It usually follows a finding of guilt and contrition by the individual that's been convicted. So, look, if I'm president of the United States, we'll give fair consideration to any pardon request. But if I may, you know, it's not about looking back at January 2021. It's about January 20th, 2017. I put my left hand on Ronald Reagan's Bible. I raised my right hand. And I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And it ended with a prayer, so help me God. It was a promise that I made to the American people, but I also made it to my Heavenly Father. Every day for 4 years, I sought to keep that oath. And everyone on this stage needs to make it clear whether or not they'll do the same if they earn this job and the confidence of the American people. Now, look, I've made it clear. I had hoped that the issues surrounding the 2020 election and the controversies around January 6th had not come to this, had not come to criminal proceedings. I would rather they had been resolved by the American people and the American people alone. But no one's above the law, and President Trump is entitled to the presumption of innocence that every American is entitled to, and we will make sure and extend that to him. But the American people deserve to know that the president asked me in his request that I reject or return votes unilaterally, power that no vice president in American history had ever exercised or taken. He asked me to put him over the Constitution. And I chose the Constitution, and I always will. I had no right to overturn the election, and Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Now we are moving on to other issues. The U.S. has committed nearly $77 billion in aid to the Ukraine war. The administration is now asking Congress for $24 billion more. Regardless of that, the specifics of that plan, is there anyone on stage who would not support the increase of more funding to Ukraine?
We would not support it. Europe needs to step up. I mean, I would have Europe step up and do their job.
Mr. Ramaswamy, but you're saying you would not too, Governor DeSantis?
I will have Europe pull their weight. Right now, they're not doing that.
You would not support
and I think we need to do, and I think our support should be contingent on them doing it. And I would have support in China to be able to take China and do.
I'm not quite sure exactly what he's doing, but he's really annoying.
So I was confused at first too, but he's mimicking DeSantis, like I'm going to see which way the political winds
gotcha.
are blowing, because DeSantis had previously referred to it as a territorial dispute. But it's a little hypocritical coming from Vivek, because he has been accused by multiple people of changing his positions on things as well. And, you know...
Go figure, a politician flip-flops.
Well, definitely true. If people get into position, they talk to more people, they learn more things, and then they change their mind, that's allowed. Don't do it just to appease people, though. And that's, unfortunately, many of us suspect that's what politicians do.
Right.
But, it's not because they're learning more.
Clearly it's annoying him. It ruins his train of thought. He's got this finger.
Well, also, it's a little childish, and, a lot of people think, he does well, Vivek does well. But I think some older people find him a little
abrasive and
brash a little cocky,
a
cocky millennial.
Gotcha. Yep. So anyway, he threw DeSantis off because DeSantis is like, "What are you doing, man?"
It's your turn to speak.
Yeah.
Funding to Ukraine.
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat we face. And I find it offensive that we have professional politicians on the stage that will make a pilgrimage to Kyiv, to their Pope, Zelensky, without doing the same thing for people in Maui or the south side of Chicago or Kensington. I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first, secure our own border instead of somebody else's. And the reality is, this is also how we project strength by making America strong at home.
All right, we heard the names. Governor Christie first.
All right, look. I did go to Ukraine, and I went to Ukraine because I wanted to see for myself what Vladimir Putin's army was doing to the free Ukrainian people. And let me tell you, I want you all to look around this arena tonight and imagine that every one of these seats was filled. And if every one of them was filled, there would still be 2,500 more children outside to make over 20,000 who have been abducted, stolen, ripped from their mothers and fathers, and brought back to Russia to be programmed to fight their own families. They have gouged out people's eyes, cut off.
We're going to have a show, definitely an episode on Ukraine, but just straight out the gate, Vladimir Putin is a war criminal.
Yeah,
he is a war criminal, and the forced relocation of human beings in a combat zone to one side or the other, and to steal children, the atrocities. I mean, he's going to get into the atrocities, but this Putin is a war criminal. He is a arrest warrant out for him by the Hague. South Africa just recently held a BRICS summit, and Putin was the only one that didn't show up, and it's more than
arrest warrant out.
more than likely because there was a South Africa is a signatory to the International Criminal Court of Law, and if you're a signatory and there is a international warrant out for somebody, you are supposed to make the arrest. And now there was a huge rift in South Africa's government on what they were going to do, because obviously if the country of South Africa arrested Putin, invariably it would be a declaration of war. I mean, it would be bad. But there were opposition groups, the opposing government in South Africa, that said we're gonna have our militias go get him, and we're gonna arrest him. And I think discretion was the better part of valor on Putin, because his safety was not guaranteed. Now he sent his foreign minister, but still, Putin could not take the chance of him flying in, because he's not carrying the entirety of Russia with him, the Russian military. He only has X amount of planes, and the population of South Africa is fairly large. But that's why Putin didn't go to the BRICS convention live. He was the only world leader of that organization that didn't go, and so that's why I didn't go. But we'll get into more of that episode. But Christie is exactly right. He's exactly right.
Their ears and shot people in the back of the head, men, and then gone into those homes and raped the daughters and the wives who were left as widows and orphans. This is the Vladimir Putin. This is the Vladimir Putin who Donald Trump called brilliant and a genius. If we don't stand up against this type of autocratic killing in the world, we will be next.
You were mentioned.
Governor Haley, we'll come back.
Vice President Pence was mentioned. You get 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, let me be clear. Anybody that thinks that we can't solve the problems here in the United States and be the leader of the free world has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth.
That is incorrect.
We can do both, Vivek. We've done both. We've been the leader of the free world and the arsenal of democracy for years. The Reagan Doctrine years ago made it clear. We said, if you're willing to fight the communists on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there so our troops don't have to fight them. Vivek, if we do the giveaway that you want to give to Putin to give him his land, it's not going to be too long before he rolls across a NATO border, and frankly, our men and women of our armed forces are going to have to go and fight him. I want to let the Ukrainians fight and drive Putin and the Russians back out into Russia.
I want to just briefly address Pence. Vice President Pence. I have a news flash. The USSR does not exist anymore. It fell back in 1990.
Did I say
the real threat? You talked about the communists, and the real communists that we have to address right now.
Do you not have any idea what Vladimir Putin's aims are?
You already spoke. Now I actually have something to say.
Vladimir Putin has been saying he wants to reestablish the old Soviet sphere
You've made
of
your
influence.
point, Vice President.
Now, if you think, I'm sorry if I insulted him by calling him a communist. He is a dictator and a murderer, and the United States of America needs to stand against authoritarianism.
Mr. Ramaswamy, 30 seconds.
Respond. The real threat we face today is communist China, and we are driving Russia further into China's arms. The Russia-China military alliance is the single greatest threat we face. Nobody in either political party is talking about it, and I am the only.
And the credit downgrade episode that we did, I talk about the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then the addition with the S with the South Africa. And then I, said, look, there's the another BRICS that's forming, and that's the Belarus, Russia, Iran, China, and Saudi Arabia. And that's exactly what he's talking about, this merging of Russia and China, and China's influence on the Belt and Road Initiative, and going into the Middle East. And in this BRICS meeting, which is funny that Goldman Sachs started as just an economic investment, but they actually formed a BRICS organization. They've invited Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so a lot of the countries that I'm referring to, and they directly want to oppose the West, and they want to have their own hegemony, and be able to have their own bloc that opposes the West. So he's right, and you're going to hear a bunch of everybody saying, look, Governor Burgum, he said the same thing. Russia and China, economies locking together. But these are facts.
Mr. Vice President, we can't hear. Mr. Vice President,
is to give Russia everything they've got.
Mr. Vice President,
give them a promise that Ukraine will never be in NATO, and then somehow China will not think about taking Taiwan. We achieve peace through strength.
Mr. Vice President,
America needs to stand for freedom.
Okay, here we go.
I think we need to establish some ground rules
when
here,
we
folks.
hear this bell,
yes,
that means your time's done. So, Mr. Vice President, we appreciate your aggressiveness here. 30 seconds is 30 seconds. Mr. Ramaswamy, you were mentioned. You get 30 seconds.
So the reality is that today, Ukraine is not a priority for the United States of America. And I think that the same people who took us into the Iraq War, the same people who took us into the Vietnam War, you cannot end it. You cannot start another no-win war. And I do not want to get to the point where we're sending our military resources abroad when we could be better using them here at home to protect our own borders, protect the homeland.
All right.
That will be my top priority.
This is true. I think this is true. That's not an untrue statement. The problem is, and obviously this is the Republican nomination debates. The problem is the Biden administration is trickling in equipment. Zelensky and Ukraine are asking for this equipment, and it is being trickled in.
And that gives Russia time.
It gives Russia time to build defenses. If the request for tanks and armor personnel carriers was immediately satisfied, Zelensky could have been using those tracked vehicles to go over the hardened terrain of Ukraine and continue the offense in preventing Russia from doing a layered defense with the anti-tank ditches and the dragon's teeth and the minefields and the concertina wire and the development of fields of fire. They gave them all winter long to do a deliberate defense, and that is really hard to overcome. And so we just keep trickling equipment in, and because we're worried about a red line being crossed, and then we get to it and that wasn't so bad, so we'll go ahead and incrementally add it. You got to give them everything they need all in one go so they can
just end it.
They can just end it and be decisive. But the trickling of the equipment in is just making this just a meat grinder. And
there's definitely no element of surprise.
Yeah, and so anyway, there's no wonder that Ukraine is not doing as well on their counteroffensive, because we failed them to get them the equipment and training when they needed it. We gave it to them, but now they're just in this meat grinder. And be decisive. You need to be decisive and get everything. Look, what is our end state? What do we see the future looking like? And give everybody all the equipment that they need, and then get it done.
And it might be cheaper in the long run.
It probably would be cheaper in the long, because now they're gonna, go into winter, into fall, into winter, and a lot of men and material have been eaten up. Now there have been some breakouts in this, and again this is the Republican debate. We're not going to go into Ukraine too much. I just wanted, because this was the topic, but there have been some incremental gains in the South and in the East, surrounding the Crimea Peninsula. So there are potential for breakouts once you pound through these defenses, but we should have been decisive earlier. And yes,
plus it would send a stronger signal to Russia as well.
Sure, and yes, the equipment being put on our southern border, we're gonna, obviously they're moving into that, but still, it it didn't have to get trickled in.
We gave you more than the 30 seconds in the rebut. So I do want to get to some other people, because everybody, we respect everybody's time here. So, Governor Haley, you did not raise your hand, meaning that you would support more funding for the Ukraine war. You have said of Governor DeSantis that you didn't appreciate it when he initially called it a territorial dispute. Why?
First of all, the American president needs to have moral clarity. They need to know the difference between right and wrong. They need to know the difference between good and evil. Right. When you look at the situation with Russia and Ukraine, here you have a pro-American country that was invaded by a thug. So when you want to talk about what has been given to Ukraine, less than 3.5% of our defense budget has been given to Ukraine. If you look at the percentages per GDP, 11 of the European countries have given more than the U.S. But what's really important is go back to when China and Russia held hands, shook hands before the Olympics, and named themselves unlimited partners. A win for Russia is a win for China. We have to know that. Ukraine is the first line of defense for us. And the problem that Vivek doesn't understand is he wants to hand Ukraine to Russia. He wants to let China eat Taiwan. He wants to go and stop funding Israel. You don't do that to friends. What you do instead is you have the backs of your friends. Ukraine is the front line of defense. Putin has said once Russia takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. That's a world war. We're trying to prevent war. Look at what Putin did today. He killed Prigozhin. When I was at the UN, the Russian ambassador suddenly died. This guy is a murderer, and you are choosing a murderer over a pro-American.
And just, again, we're not a dedicated news channel, but Prigozhin was the founder and the head of the mercenary group Wagner, or if you want to pronounce the W, Wagner. And that's the private military company that operates in Africa and also was doing a majority of the heavy lifting in the fight for Bakhmut, operating in Ukraine. And just he led a 24-hour rebellion that was almost successful, 125 miles outside of Moscow, shooting down multiple attack helicopters and warplanes, and then he stopped, and he was promised a pathway to get to Belarus and kind of be just gone, like banished and exiled. And he kept pushing his luck, going back to Russia,
flying near Russian airspace,
was going from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and reports say that there was an explosion on the plane, and the plane went out of the sky. So
someone you're trying to kill, and it's Putin. Either be decisive or decide your life is over.
As soon as he stopped the rebellion, he had to have known that Putin wasn't just going to
leave it.
No. Oh, there's no grudge here. No, go ahead. So anyway, but that's what she's talking about, Prigozhin.
First of all, Mr. Ramaswamy, you have 30 seconds. Mr. DeSantis,
Nikki, I wish you well in your future career on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon.
I'm not on the fact of the matter, and
Boeing came off of it, but you've been pushing this lie. You've been pushing this lie all week, Nikki.
You want to go and defund Israel? You want to
okay, let me address that. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to address each of those right now. This is the false lies of a professional politician. There you have it.
Your watch, so the reality is, America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what? The foreign policy experience that you all have shows in the.
That's her second mic drop, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, she literally is moving forward. She's being aggressive, and she's being forceful, and she's being rational, right? So a lot of times, unfairly, women get called emotional when they're.
Yeah, she's not being emotional.
She's not being emotional.
Some people may accuse her, but this was her job.
Right.
Under President Trump, this was her job, so she knows.
Right. She was the ambassador of the United Nations, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Yeah, she knows, and telling him you have no foreign policy experience, and it shows. It's a fair shot to take.
All this wars we've gotten into, I have to address that. So our relationship with Israel will never be stronger than by the end of my first term. But it's not a client relationship. It is a friendship. And you know what friends do? Friends help each other stand on their own 2 feet. So I will lead Abraham Accords 2.0. I will partner with Israel to make sure Iran never is nuclear armed. But you know what I love about Israel? And I've been there probably in the last 10 years more than most people on this stage. You know what I love about them? I love their border policies. I love their tough on crime policies. I love that they have a national identity and an iron dome to protect their homeland. And so, yes, I want to learn from the friends that we're supporting. And what puzzles me is, I want to learn from those and apply those to protect our homeland, Nikki.
Israel
that is
needs
the answer.
America. America needs Israel.
Okay, Governor DeSantis, you were mentioned in the territorial dispute. Not only...
no, it's not a territorial dispute
President
either.
of the United States, your first obligation is to defend our country and its people. And that means you're sending all this money, but you're not doing what we need to do to secure our own border. We have tens of thousands of people who are being killed because we're not handling both. And so I am going to declare it a national emergency. I'm not going to send troops to Ukraine, but I am going to send them to our southern border. When these drug pushers are bringing fentanyl across the border, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to use force, and we're going to leave them stone cold dead.
We're actually going to move on to China. We're going to talk about China.
Okay.
And he said this multiple times. That's a prepared response and powerful.
Yeah, it's good though.
It's good. It's powerful.
If it works, it works.
And so I mean, he is a big proponent for closing the southern border. And we had an episode where a segment where we talked about immigration and the southern border. So feel free to check that out. But he's absolutely right. But Nikki Haley's also right. We can do both. I think we can do both. So the United States military, doctrinally, during the 80s and 90s, was designed to fight 2.5 wars simultaneously. And so what that looked like was a war against Russia, or the Soviet Union specifically, full, high-intensity conflict against the Soviet Union, a full high-intensity conflict on the Korean Peninsula, and then when I say a half a war, is military conflicts, spotting up around the world. That was before the United States Army was cut down to 10 divisions.
And we're having a recruiting problem as well, and we'll have a future episode addressing that as well.
Right, but the old doctrine from the 70s, 80s, and the beginning of the 90s, to be able to fight 2.5 wars simultaneously, we can't do that anymore with the men, weapons, and equipment that we have.
Sounds like we need to get back to that point, though.
We might need to get back to that point.
Governor Burgum, China has the biggest navy in the world, the biggest army in the world. Now they have warships off the coast of Alaska. They are threatening Taiwan. In coming years, China will have 1,500 nuclear warheads, it's believed. The U.S. just arrested 2 sailors accused of spying for China within our military. So the question is, how would you deter China as a president, Burgum?
Well, this is the number one issue we're facing. And of course, we haven't been talking about it, and we act like that letting Russia win in the Ukraine is like a gimme as opposed to a gift to China. Russia has become China's gas station. But how would we do it? The Biden administration is a complete fail. China imports 10 million barrels of oil a day, more than any other country in the world. They do not even have all the food they need to feed everybody in that country, so they don't have energy security or food security. But the Biden administration sends Blinken, Yellen over there. They're over there talking. They don't even bring up energy because they're too busy trying to kill the U.S. energy here. And what we need to do is not meetings, not press releases, because something that would send a lot more than a press release is actually Harpoon missiles. We need anti-ship missiles on Taiwan. The way that you have a war never start, which is the goal, the way you have peace through strength, is that you actually have strength. You actually have deterrence. And what we have in what we've got going on in Ukraine is an example of when deterrence fail. What is an example there of Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the fact that he green-lighted Putin moving into Ukraine, and then now they see week weakness, and when they see weakness, they make a move. And we have to be strong, and we have to be strong both in Ukraine, and we can solve the southern border. Absolutely, we can do that, because guess what? There's only 19,855 authorized people for the Border Patrol, but they're not all staff because the Biden administration doesn't enforce law enforcement. But Biden administration wanted to put 87,000 people in the IRS as opposed to giving the money and the support we need to our own Border Patrol.
Okay. Senator Scott, on China, that same question.
And I speak about China.
Let's fire the 87,000 IRS agents and hire or double the number of Border Patrol agents. I just left Yuma, Arizona about 2 weeks ago. The most pressing need of the American people from a national security standpoint is our southern border. It has led to the death of 70,000 Americans because of fentanyl. Plus 6 million illegal crossings since President Biden has taken office, and 200 people on our national security watch list have been caught at our border. How many have not been caught at our southern border? If we just spend $10 billion, we could finish the wall.
And that's a point that we brought up in our immigration and border security
to surveil
segment
our
was
southern border to stop
what
the
is
flow of
the
fentanyl
phantom number
and save 70,000 Americans a year. That should be the priority of this government. And as the next president of the United States, I will make that border wall complete.
There are many more questions on China. I do want to ask
I want to say I couldn't agree more. It's not just the 70,000 from fentanyl. We've lost 200,000 people to overdoses since Biden took office. That's 300 people a day. We're taking mass casualties, and that's a statistic, but these are sons and daughters, nieces and nephews that we're losing. We've got North Dakota troops down there flying night helicopter missions from San Diego to the Gulf Coast, trying to stop these transnational criminal organizations. They've got better funding on their side than we've got on our side.
Speaking of which, Governor Hutchinson, images from earlier this month, Governor Hutchinson,
with Mexico,
Vice President Pence, images from earlier this month. Vice President Pence, it really doesn't help. I'm asking a question. Earlier this month.
One of the things that we're going to be doing, we have a list of episodes for us to do, but since they're talking about fentanyl and they're talking about China and talking about southern border, China is trying to wipe us out.
Yes, on multiple fronts.
On multiple fronts. And, we'll have dedicated multiple series of episodes on those. But the fentanyl chemicals are coming from China, and they're being shipped to Mexico where they're turned into the end product, and then that end product is coming over the southern border. So you have to figure that it's being laced not just as a fentanyl pill, but it's being laced into Percocet, into Xanax, and what's happening is you're getting a young teenager who orders one pill on the internet and says, "Look, I'm going to cram for an exam," pops it, dead.
Yeah. When we were growing up, it was don't take candy from strangers. Now it's don't take drugs from someone who's not an actual pharmacist.
Yeah, or don't buy a single pill off the internet. And so anyway, China's doing this on purpose. They're clearly doing this on purpose. They are a communist country. They control every aspect of their nation. They have social credit scores. They're monitoring everybody. You cannot tell me that there's some kind of secret fentanyl lab that's going on that's producing these chemicals that the Chinese communists don't know. I mean, you can't go anywhere without a mask on or do say anything bad without your neighbors reporting on you via an app for this social credit score. China knows what's going on. They've publicly addressed it. They said, we'll take care of it. But it is just increasing. And so whenever you see, look, we intercepted a shipment of fentanyl that could have killed every single person in the state of New York and everybody in New York City. I mean, they're telling the truth. I mean, just a small dose is just absolutely deadly.
If a regime threatens you, take them at their word.
Yep.
Images showed suspected cartel members crossing into Texas with rifles. Do you consider this an invasion? Would you authorize?
And if you look, not only is it weapons,
like
but also
tactical gear.
Yeah, tactical gear and body armor. So I mean, they have plate carriers.
This is not a mother and baby trying to
no.
seek a better life.
Authorize lethal force along that border?
There would be lethal force used by the Border Patrol, law enforcement as needed to protect the border. Absolutely. When you look at the military has to be used for intelligence gathering purposes. This is not unusual. Whenever I was in the Bush administration, we went down there and met with President Vicente Fox of Mexico and asked his help in going after the cartels. And he looked at me and said, they're a problem to us as well. And so we joined together and we took down the Ariana Felix brothers leading the Tijuana cartel, and that made a difference. Ramon was shot and killed, and Ben Amin was captured. Cooperation makes a difference. We cannot be successful going against the cartel unless we bring in Mexico as a partner. We have to use economic pressure to accomplish that. President Obrador has not been helpful, and we have to use economic pressure that this administration is not using. The rule of law has to matter on both sides of it.
Okay.
This is critical. I've done it. We know what needs to be done. The military has to be limited in its use. When after 9/11, we had the global war on terror, and guess what? We protected the border at the same time. You can do both.
Okay, let's go to Governor DeSantis. So, as president, would you support sending U.S. Special Forces over the border into Mexico to take out fentanyl labs, to take out drug cartel operations? Would you support that kind of American military use?
Yes, and I will do it on day one. Here's the thing. The cartels are killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens. You want to talk about a country in decline? You have the cartels controlling a lot of part of your southern border. We have to reestablish the rule of law, and we have to defend our people. The President of the United States has got to use all available powers as Commander-in-Chief to protect our country and to protect the people. So when they're coming across, yes, we're going to use lethal force. Yes, we reserve the right to operate. How many more tens of thousands are we going to let to die? I am sick. I've met angel moms throughout this country. I met a lady in Texas named Tracy, and her son took one Percocet that was laced with fentanyl, immediately died. That is happening all across this country because of the poison that they are bringing in. So as president, would I use force? Would I treat them as foreign terrorist organizations? You're darn right I would.
You know, Vice President Pence, why would you be better at this issue than Governor DeSantis? Governor DeSantis on the campaign trail refers to your administration as not finishing the wall.
Right. Look, we secured the southern border of the United States of America and reduced illegal immigration and asylum abuse by 90%. When Joe Biden took over, he threw open the southern border of the United States, and the wave of humanity, the wave of fentanyl that's been eloquently described here is a wave of human tragedy across this country. But Martha, you began this evening talking about who is best prepared to be the next president of the United States. And I have to tell you, with all humility, I was there when we negotiated through the government shutdown and got the funding available to build the wall. I was negotiating on Capitol Hill around the clock. I negotiated the Remain in Mexico policy on behalf of the President of the United States. And Asa, you're so right. It's because we used economic pressure to bring the Mexicans to the table, and they allowed us to have people wait in Mexico while they applied for asylum and ended asylum abuse overnight. We got the Mexicans to deploy their National Guard to their southern border and to our southern border as never before. And I want to promise you, as President of the United States of America, I will engage Mexico the exact same way, and we will partner with the Mexican military, and we will hunt down and destroy the cartels that are claiming lives in the
a problem with that, and and obviously you don't want to start an international war by
Right. I was wondering if sending troops is that an act of war? Is that legal?
Yeah, I mean, it in an armed conflict, I don't think Mexico would be a hard opponent at all, and I mean that very loosely. It would not even be a contest. But still, I mean, there are international treaties and things like that, and the problem is, we have the partnerships with Mexico, but we have, would you send U.S. Special Forces down there? That makes great movies, makes great spy thrillers,
theatrics,
Sicario. It seems like it'd be a great idea, but the problem is the not everybody. You can't paint a big brush on everybody, but there is a lot of corruption in Mexico, and I can only imagine.
To say the police aren't in on it, and then they warn.
Yeah, I mean, you go there and there's the big warehouse, and you go in and there's nothing there. Now, it doesn't always happen. I mean, there's good people everywhere, but it would definitely be touchy to try and take care of this. So there's pluses and minuses, but there definitely would be diplomatic repercussions just by sending troops down there. It's not a Tom Clancy novel.
United States of America.
Okay, thank you. Another issue that is related to this is that almost 7 million migrants have crossed this border, our southern border, during the Biden administration. So, Governor Christie, what would you do about the 7 million who are here? How would you handle them? What would you do?
Look, Martha, the first thing we need to do is to stop any more from coming. That's the first thing we need to do. Then the next thing we need to do with the folks that are here is to, again, as we've talked about all night tonight, we have to have law and order in this country. We have to enforce the law. And what that means is to make sure that people who come here illegally are not rewarded for being here illegally. We have so many wonderful people from around the world who are waiting in line, following the law to try to come here and pursue the American dream. And those people are waiting and waiting and waiting because we haven't dealt with the problem of the folks who are here. We have to have them detained. We have to make sure that they are not rewarded for having broken the law. And one last thing on this fentanyl issue. With China, we can't take our eye off of that ball. Yes, it's important that we secure the border. Very important, as I just said. But China is sending these chemicals to these drug cartels for them to create the fentanyl that is killing hundreds of thousands of our citizens. The Chinese are engaging in an act of war against us, killing our citizens. We better make that priority one in our conversations with China and to try to straighten that relationship out, because if we don't, we're going to lose more and more of our citizens.
I just want to clarify, would you send those people back?
Of course. You'd have to.
We have a lot of issues that Americans care about. Next up, we're going to talk about the crisis in education, as millions of American children are not proficient in reading or math.
So that was the third segment. And, obviously, that was a lot of foreign policy. So you can kind of see the path that they're going. So that was all foreign policy questions. And who do you think won those exchanges in that particular segment?
I mean, I like Nikki Haley.
Mm-hmm.
She's the most practical. Now, all that stuff does cost money, and she was talking about debt. But then again, what difference does our debt make if we're under another country's thumb?
Well, that's true.
Now, Christie, he said that he would send back
7 million
illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
The question that I have is, one, that would take a lot of work, but two, the babies that are born here, they're a citizen, so you're just going to leave the kid here and send the parents back?
Well, yeah, obviously it's a multifaceted issue, and we're not not just talking about Hispanics and South Americans. That 7 million
includes other nationalities,
yeah,
as we mentioned in a previous episode.
Africans and Asians and Europeans. I mean, that's a worldwide population. That's 7 million, and it's a an interesting question. I mean, one of the things that Trump has said is that he's going to end birthright citizenship. That's I don't know. I mean,
that's a big hill to climb. And what's the alternative?
Attorneys that are going to. Well, the rest of the world has, in fact, very few countries in the world have birthright citizenship, and so it would be easy to say, well, I'm recommending what the rest of the world does, and it's the citizenship of the parents determine the citizenship of the child. But with our birthright citizenship, it's not just the illegal immigrants that are coming across, but you have birth tourism that is taking place, and there is not a country that is immune to saying that they have birth tourism, but as a matter and a statement of fact, a lot of Chinese mothers that are in the 9th month of their pregnancy will fly to Guam and then conveniently have their child in Guam, or fly into San Francisco. There are numerous factual raids have been conducted on Asian houses that have deeply significantly pregnant women from China that have the child, and then they go through the process and get their birth certificates, and they fly back home. And it's the same thing for Eastern Europeans, same thing for African. I mean, there's not a single continent that isn't doing it, but it does set us up for failure in the future to have a person that grows up in communist China, but is a U.S. citizen and can come into the country.
Yeah,
easily.
they're a citizen and don't have our values.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and start the fourth segment.
After this. The nation's report card was the weakest ever for American school children, exposing chronic absenteeism, deep declines for reading and math for 15-year-olds and 13-year-olds. Governor DeSantis, you would eliminate, you said, the Department of Education. But as president, would you still have a responsibility to fix this crisis as we see it?
Absolutely. The decline in education is one of the major reasons why our country is in decline. We need education in this country, not indoctrination.
We need mathematics.
We need facts.
1 plus 1, the square root of 81, geometry, trigonometry. We
diagram a sentence.
We need diagram a sentence.
Civics.
And civics. Those are the things that we need. Those are the things that we need.
This country. And in Florida, we stood up for what was right. First, we had schools open during COVID, and a lot of the problems that we've seen are because these lockdown states lock their kids out of school for a year and a half. That was wrong. We stood up. I took a lot of fire for that. I was pilloried by the media, but I stood for our kids. And as president, I'll stand for you and your kids as well. But we have to make sure that what our schools are doing is focusing on solid academics. In Florida, we eliminated critical race theory from our K-12 schools. We eliminated gender ideology from our K-12 schools. And we have elevated the importance of American civics in teaching our kids about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. As president, I'm going to lead an effort to increase civic understanding and knowledge of our Constitution. We cannot be graduating students that don't have any foundation in what it means to be an American.
Mr. Ramaswamy, hold on, Senator Scott. You've said that the Department of Education, the FBI, the ATF, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the IRS, the Department of Commerce, many of these should not exist.
That's correct.
So to the education question, how would you deal with the crisis?
So look, we have a crisis of achievement. Let's shut down the head of the snake, the Department of Education. Take that $80 billion, put it in the hands of parents across this country. This is the civil rights issue of our time. Allow any parent to choose where they send their kids to school. End the teachers' unions at the local level to allow public schools to compete. And then revive our national identity where every high school senior should have to pass the same civics test that, frankly, every immigrant, including my mother, had to pass in order to become a citizen of this country. And the fact of the matter is, look, there's a part of education policy that also rests with the family. I didn't grow up in money, but you know the word privilege gets used a lot? Well, you know what? I did have the ultimate privilege of 2 parents in the house with a focus on educational achievement. And I want every kid to enjoy that. So part of the problem is we also have a federal government that pays single women more not to have a man in the house than to have a man in the house, contributing to an epidemic of fatherlessness. And I think that goes hand in glove with the education crisis as well, because we have to remember education starts with the family, and the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind.
True.
If the family doesn't value it,
Governor
the kid won't
Haley
value
has
it.
said, Governor Haley has said that biological boys playing in girls' sports is the women's issue of our time. You said that even though you signed a ban on this in North Dakota, that there hadn't been one instance where it was actually needed. Are you saying that you think that too much is made of this issue?
No, I'm saying in North Dakota, we made a priority of protecting women's sports, and we've done that in our state. But I would absolutely do that. But I do think when we start talking about education and we think that we're going to have a federal government one size fits all, we're just completely losing track of the fact that education differs by states. Some school districts are doing a fantastic job, some less so. But the idea that every school district, state, and every teacher is somehow indoctrinating people is just false. You know, when I was building a company from scratch, you know, with small town kids, and we went, you know, grew up in a town of 300, but we built a global company in 132 countries with over 100,000 customers. We listened to those customers. We spent time with them. We talked to them. We did that. And as governor, well, education is one of the biggest part of a state budget. So as a governor, I shadow a student. I don't, the night before I find out the student finds out, I'm going to go to every class with them. I don't sit and lecture school districts how to do it. I go and see the experience. And there's a lot of things that have to change. But what needs to change in education is it's innovation. We're doing it the same way we did it 50 years ago with innovation, not regulation. I would get rid of the Department of Education. I would give block grants to schools, but I'd give them on merit based on who's doing the most innovative. I just got done holding the 7th annual Governor's Conference on Innovation Education. You should see what the people are doing when you cut loose the red tape, get the burden off their back. They care. Teachers in this country, the vast majority of them care about those kids. They're working in low-paying jobs, and they're fighting for those kids and their families.
That's where you got to sit.
Governor Haley, you said that this is the women's issue of our time.
First, I'll tell you, as you know, as a parent, the one thing you want is for your child to have a better life than you did. And we can talk about all of these things, and there's a lot of crazy woke things happening in schools, but we've got to get these kids reading. If a child can't read by 3rd grade, they're 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So we need to make sure we bring in reading remediation all over this country. We need transparency in the classroom because parents should never have to wonder what's being said or taught to their children in the classroom. Parents need to be deciding which schools their kids go to because they know best. And let's put vocational classes back into the high schools. Let's teach our kids to build things again.
Home ec.
When we do that and we allow that innovation, that's when it'll get back. And yes, I will always say I'm going to fight for girls all day long because strong girls become strong women become strong leaders, and biological boys don't belong in the locker rooms of any of our girls.
We're going to start the lightning round, and the first question is going to go to you, Vice President. So this is a lightning round of questions, 30-second answers, please. President Biden will be 82 years old on Inauguration Day. Nearly 70% of Americans say that he is too old to serve. Should presidents have to pass a mental and physical test in order to serve Vice President Pence?
Well, it might be a good idea to have everybody in Washington, D.C. pass a mental.
He's had a couple
He's got
good
a couple
jokes.
good one-liners.
30 seconds, no. The American people can make those judgments. But let me say, I'm running for president of the United States because we don't need a president who's too old. And we don't need a president who's too young.
Boom.
We need a president who's been there. We need a president who knows how Congress works, how the White House works, how states work. And on this education issue, Martha, I was fighting against No Child Left Behind when Republicans were doubling the Department of Education. I'll also shut down the Federal Department of Education. And when I was governor, we doubled the size of the largest school choice program in America. And we'll give school choice to every family in America when I'm in the White House.
This is a lightning round, Mr. Ramaswamy. I think you were mentioned there. You're 38. You're the youngest on the stage. You've said, and you just said, you want a civics test or public service for those under 25 to be able to vote. So the question is, do you want a mental acuity test for presidents over 75?
I believe in the people of this country to tell the difference between somebody who's an automaton and somebody who's actually a thinking agent in the White House, which we don't have in there today. And I will tell you, I want to address Vice President Pence's comment. I think we do need somebody of a different generation to lead this nation forward. Look at the way I've run this campaign. Go into the south side of Chicago, to Kensington, in the middle of Philadelphia, where traditional Republican candidates don't go. We have an opportunity to build a multi-ethnic, working-class majority to deliver a landslide, and I think I'm the only candidate in this race, young or old, black or white, to bring all of those voters along to deliver a Reagan 1980 revolution. We're going to do it in 2024.
Same question to you,
In a presidential election until 2020.
I will answer that. I will answer that.
30 seconds.
30-second quick answer.
You guys need to get control of this debate.
Everybody's going to get a chance to get
Listen, we're getting control of the debate. This is a lightning round, not rolling thunder. Governor Hutchinson, you have 30 seconds on the same question.
On education, first of all, look at Arkansas. We have to compete with China. I built computer science education. We led the nation in computer science education, going from 1,100 students to 23,000 students taking it. This is how you compete with China. As President of the United States, I will make sure we go from 51% of our schools offering computer science to every school in rural areas and urban areas offering computer science for the benefit of our kids, and we can compete with China in terms of technology.
Thank you, sir. This is going to go to this is coming to you. We're trying to do a quick round of different topics here. So, Senator Scott, faith is on decline in this country. You talked about it a little bit before tonight. So, is there a role for a president of the United States in changing that? What would you do to change that?
Well, our nation was founded upon the Judeo-Christian values that has made this the greatest nation on God's green earth. I'm a big believer in Ephesians 3:20 that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or imagine. Our responsibility should be to model the behavior we want others to follow. On education, the only way we change education in this nation is to break the backs of the teachers' unions. They are standing in the doorhouse of our kids, locking them into failing schools and locking them out of the greatest future they could have.
As President, Governor DeSantis, would you support some mandatory military service for all Americans?
I think it should be voluntary. I'm somebody that volunteered to serve, inspired by September 11th, and I deployed to Iraq alongside U.S. Navy SEALs in places like Fallujah, Ramadi. And it's something that I think has taught me, you know, when you go in that type of environment, anything you have, your personal agenda, you check it at the door. You go there, and it's about focusing on the mission above all else. And guys come together, and they get it done. And that's how I would view being the President of the United States. It's not about me. It's not about all these other side issues. My sole focus will be on your future and reversing this country's decline.
Okay, now for something a little out of this world, and this is for you, Governor Christie. Do you believe that the recent spike in UFO encounters...
I get the UFO question?
Yeah, you do.
Come on, man.
I think that was a missed opportunity on from the moderators. I think that could have been. There's so many more topics that are interesting. Now, we did do a segment on UFOs, but
we're a podcast.
We're
not, interviewing people for the most powerful position in the world,
right?
And all the other things that they could have spent more time on, or things that they're not even addressing so far. That's ridiculous. And Christie, let's see how he handles it.
But, okay, we've been hearing a lot of we've been hearing a lot of testimony in Congress, and people are taking this a lot more seriously. And we're hearing that, there are things going on that people aren't aware of. So, if you were president, Governor Christie, would you level with the American people about what the government knows about these possible encounters?
Martha, and especially coming from a woman from New Jersey, I think it's horrible that just because I'm from New Jersey, you asked me about unidentified flying objects and Martians. We're different, but we're not that different. Look, of course, the job of the President of the United States is to level with the American people about everything. The job of the President of the United States is to stand for truth. The job of the President of the United States is to be a role model for our children and our grandchildren. And so whether it was UFOs or this problem of education, and Tim's right, by the way, and I started this in 2010 by going right after the teachers' unions in New Jersey and drove them down to an all-time low popularity rating because they were putting themselves before our kids. That is the biggest threat to our country, not UFOs.
Okay. Well, coming up,
like
we've
how he
got
turned it
closing
around.
arguments. Plus, right after the debate, Hannity is live from the spin room right here in the Fiserv Forum with reaction from all the candidates as soon as...
So that was the end of the fourth segment, and the fifth segment is small, and it's I believe it's closing statements.
Mm-hmm.
But the UFO question, again, that was a missed opportunity. I don't know if it was designed to draw some humor. I think Governor Christie handled it as best as he could.
Yeah.
And he kind of turned lemons into lemonade by being able to talk about a virtue of telling the truth. So I mean he spun it the way he needed it to. He got the ding because he was trying to bring additional levity to saying, hey, we're from New Jersey, this, that, and the other, which is so he ate up 10 seconds of his 30 seconds. But great answers on education, great answers on that they're telling the truth about the teachers unions. That's an unfortunate organization that that there's a major
noble profession.
Yeah, it's for a noble profession, and a lot of teachers don't want to be part of that, but their school contracts require it. So anyway, it'd be interesting if there were choices for teachers unions, like there's a conservative teachers union or the current teachers union or something like that you really do believe in. So anyway, let's get to the fifth segment, which like I said should be closing statements.
They step off the stage. We'll be back after this. 20 years ago, 70% of American adults said they were extremely proud to be an American. That number has now plummeted to just 39%. In his pitch to get to the Oval Office, President Reagan called America the shining city on a hill, a beacon of hope and optimism.
So in your closing statement tonight, please tell American voters why you are the person who can inspire this nation to a better day. These are 45 seconds, and we begin with Governor Burgum.
I understand why America's hurting. Biden's inflation is choking us. I grew up in a small town. My dad died when I was a freshman in high school. My mom, widow of 3, went back to work. Every job I had growing up was one where I took a shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning of the day. Our cities are less safe because of the fentanyl pouring into this country. Our economy is being crushed by Biden's energy policies, which are raising the cost of every product you buy, not just the gasoline at the pump. One thing that I'll do as president, I'll secure the border. I'll get this economy sprinting, not crawling like it is right now. And I would say that other thing is for sure, when I'm on a horseback in the Badlands of North Dakota, it looks like the horizon is just limitless. And when you can almost see beyond that horizon, you can see that this great country, our future is unlimited. But we've got to focus on innovation, not regulation. We've got to cut the red tape. We've got to drive ourselves forward. The way we win the Cold War with China is by growing our economy and through innovation. And as president, I will bring out the best of America. I will improve every American life.
So there's going to, I'll be all the candidates. Let's kind of react to each one because it's a good opportunity. How did you think his closing statement was?
I don't know. Maybe used a little more of the inspiration of the sunset on horseback.
He seemed a little nervous to me.
Yeah, well, he has a torn ACL as well, so I hope everyone keeps that in mind. I have never had a problem with my ACL, but I hear it hurts.
Yeah, I mean, was he on any type of pain medication, or was it just a local anesthetic?
From what I've heard, he's not on medication.
Okay, so he's just sucking it up. And so, yeah, I thought, I mean, it's very scenic. And it's there's a romanticism that's attached.
Yeah, I think he could have used that a little more.
I think a little more
because it
imagery.
Said aspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, he hit all the topics. China, he hit education, he hit as president, I'm going to do this, and it
was a good summary, but didn't achieve the goal of being aspirational.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we hope you're back on your horse soon, Governor.
Governor Hutchinson?
Our nation is in trouble, and it's in trouble because of failed leadership. And the solution is not 4 more years of Joseph Biden. The solution is not 4 more years of Donald Trump. The solution is new leadership that can bring bold ideas to America and to bring out the best of America. A president's #1 responsibility is to bring out the best of our people. That's what Ronald Reagan did. And he did it with optimism and hope for our country, with a consistent conservatism. That's exactly what I bring. As president, I'll bring out the best of America in terms of individual responsibility, building our economy, in terms of securing our border, enforcing the rule of law. I'll bring out the best of America in terms of our national character, our faith, and our hope for the future. Join in this fight, asa2024.com.
All right, what do you think about that one?
It was okay. It was
sincere.
Yes. Yeah, I felt that. But not that aspirational either. But it was okay.
Well, I thought it was sincere. I thought he's obviously very articulate.
Yes.
He's an attorney. He's a governor, so he has a good public speaking diction and cadence and persona. He came across as very friendly to me.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Thank you. I was a disillusioned young man growing up in a single-parent household mired in poverty. I wondered if the American dream was real for a kid like me. I can stand before you today and say the dream is alive, it is well, and it is healthy. I had the good fortune of a mom who worked 16-hour days making sure we have food on our tables. She taught me that if you're able-bodied in America, you work. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. And if God made you a man, you play sports against men. I'm Tim Scott. I'm asking you for your vote, and if you're in Iowa, I'm asking you to caucus for me. You can go to votetimscott.com for more information or to make a contribution.
Okay.
He started off more aspirational. I think
Right.
he should have ended that way.
Right. I agree. Again, we are not there. I wonder if there was instructions. A lot of times, if there's a camera, there's going to be a red light or something like that on the camera. That's the one you're supposed to look into. He didn't find that camera until the last 10 seconds of his 45 seconds. So everybody else
maybe he was focused on the crowd.
It could be, or he was focused on the moderators. Is what the
Right.
angle that he was looking at. But Bergman and Hutchinson, they found the camera right away,
Right.
and were looking into the camera, and he didn't find it until the last 10 seconds. That's the only thing I would say.
Governor Christie.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Martha. Look, everybody on this stage wants to be the next president of the United States. And the only way that's going to happen is if we beat Joe Biden. I'm the only one on this stage who's ever beaten a Democratic incumbent in an election. I did it in a deep blue state, being outspent 3-1. Beating a Democratic incumbent is not easy. The last Democratic incumbent president who was defeated was Jimmy Carter. And he was defeated by a conservative governor from a blue state who knew how to get results, who stood for the truth, who cared about accountability, and stood strong and hard against waste. Those are the very things that I did in my 8 years as governor of New Jersey, and it's exactly what I'll do as president of the United States. Believe me, the Democrats want some other nominee who's never beaten the Democratic incumbent. I'm the one who can win this race, and if you give me the chance, I will restore our country by winning it.
Thank you.
So he kind of split the difference. I think he was looking at the moderators, and I think he was looking at the camera, and he kept shifting back and forth.
I mean, I like the way he said his record, but not aspirational. Good sounding record, though.
It's a good resume.
Yes.
He's got a great resume. Yes. But again, and you have to also remember that we're not aware of what the last question was going to be. Hey, campaigns, the question's going to be, Reagan's shining city on a hill, aspirational. Make sure that your memorized end speech is going to be focused on that. I mean, I'm sure they were given, hey, you got 45 seconds, so they probably had that heads up, and so they're not winging it. They have their prepared 45 seconds, and they probably timed it again and again and again, and then. Obviously we're given instructions. If you hear the ding, just keep going. So 45 seconds doesn't
no turning off of the mic.
Yeah, 45 seconds doesn't necessarily mean 45 seconds. You take a minute if you need it. And this is Governor and Ambassador Haley's.
Governor Haley.
Several weeks ago, I dropped my husband, Michael, a combat veteran from Afghanistan, off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they had never been, all in the name of protecting America. If they are willing to protect us from there, we should be willing to fight for America here. I will beat Joe Biden, and he knows that. I will strengthen our economy, and we'll bring this inflation down. We will put transparency in the classroom. We will secure our borders. We will have the backs of our law enforcement, and we will make sure we have a strong national security. And once again, we will make sure we have an America that is strong and proud. We have a country to save. Join us. Go to NikkiHaley.com, and let's get it done.
I would say that's the most motivational of the ones we've had so far. And of course, it's good to mention the patriotism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, her husband is a service member, and being able to relate, that to her campaign as hey, she has skin in the game.
Yep.
And so now I know Mike Pence's son is a Marine, and so there's other people that have skin in the game too. But she has skin in the game as a candidate, and I thought she was clear. I thought she was firm, and I liked let's get it done. Yeah. She made the little pledge that all of the candidates had to sign in order to get on the debate stage to support the eventual nominee against President Biden. She made an annotation to hers where she wrote in Kamala Harris instead of Biden, because she does not feel that Biden is going to serve his full term. And so she wants to make sure that people also understand that this is an election between the Republican nominee and Kamala Harris as well. It's not just about Biden. So if you're thinking this is just Biden versus a Republican candidate, that's not it. It's Biden and Harris as a candidate.
So you need to assess your opinion on both.
Yep. And so anyway, she made that handwritten annotation on hers, which I thought was pretty crafty.
Vice President Pence.
Thank you, Brad and Martha, for this evening. It's an honor to be here. Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, their war on energy, runaway spending that launched the worst inflation in 40 years, a crisis at our southern border, an assault on our values and liberties, and the American people have had enough. But I know we can bring it back. But different times call for different leadership. The Republican Party owes the American people a choice. Proven leadership at the national level that knows how to move a conservative agenda forward. We proved in the Trump-Pence years you can turn this country around faster than you can imagine. And I have faith we will again. Because I have faith in the American people. A good, decent, hard-working, faith-filled, idealistic people of this country. And I have faith that God is not done with America yet. And if we will renew our faith in one another and renew our faith in Him who has ever guided this nation since we arrived on these wilderness shores, I know the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come.
Well, I mean, that was very inspirational and aspirational.
Mm-hmm. I think it met the goal.
Yeah. He's been very forceful. He's been very articulate during this debate. He's interjected. He's been aggressive, so he's not afraid.
I think he has surprised people with the sense of humor and the aggressiveness.
And honestly, barring the fly that landed on his head in the vice presidential debates for the 2020 election, barring that fly, I don't remember seeing him like this, unless he was instructed not to be like this. But I wish this guy would have been at that debate.
Right.
Honestly. Now, I have not seen any of his gubernatorial debates when he was running for governor, or whether Indiana has them. When I lived in Indiana, I was a young child.
And he also used to be a radio talk show host.
Sure. So he's
there
very
is
well
personality
spoken.
there.
Yeah, he's got personality, but I don't recall, and that might be my own memory, but I don't recall him being as forceful in the vice presidential debate for the 2020 election than for this. I mean, so I could be wrong, but he stepped up his game.
Thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy.
I was born in 1985, and I grew up into a generation where we were taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways we are really just the same as Americans, bound by a common set of ideals that set this nation into motion in 1776. And this is our moment to revive those common ideals. God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to man. Capitalism lifts us up from poverty. There are 3 branches of government, not 4. And the U.S. Constitution, it is the strongest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what will win us the revolution of 2024. Thanks for letting me introduce myself tonight. Thank you.
That was energetic.
He is, well, I've never seen him without energy.
Right.
And he has kids younger than ours. Yeah, it was good. It was inspirational. I liked we've been so focused on diversity, we've forgotten core values.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what should be celebrated.
I really appreciated his stances that he has, and he did them in bullets.
Right.
And he did it with decisiveness.
Yeah.
There are 2 genders. There is a God, and there was a period on the end of all of his points.
That implies that he would govern accordingly.
Right. And again, he's full of energy. People looked at that is that brash? Is that rubbing people the wrong way? But I'd rather have somebody with high energy than low energy, and that's former President Trump always has nicknames for people, and calls them Sleepy Joe and low energy. Was it low energy Bush for the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush? And so again, I'd rather have somebody high energy than low energy.
Well, when you're talking to Putin or Xi Jinping, you need not just energy, but like be able to convince them like, hey, like with Trump telling Putin, if you invaded Ukraine, it would be a mistake.
Right. Well, I guess.
And it didn't happen right away, right?
Right. Well, I guess. It's
like,
we'd
take
have
my
to
threat seriously.
We'd have to see what he's like in a pharmaceutical board meeting to see if he's more business oriented or if he's that same high energy. So if he does meet with Putin, is he going to be jumping up and down with his hands in his pockets, or is there a serious side to him?
Right.
So I mean, just kind of brings me to the recollection of President Obama straight up mean mugging Putin in I think it was, I don't want to lie, but I think it was a Davos summit, and they ran into each other in the hallway, and you've got security, Secret Service with obviously the Obama and probably the FSB and with Putin. And Obama's tall. He's tall, and so he was much taller than Putin. So he's looking down at Putin, but it was a mean mug look, and it was actually probably the most serious I've ever seen President Obama be photographed as. And I thought it was very inspirational, the way he was looking at Putin and showing disdain and being firm. And I don't know if Ramaswamy can do that. Well, I'm not saying he can't, but I'd like to see a serious side. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the last candidate, DeSantis.
Governor DeSantis. Governor?
This is our time for choosing. We will send Joe Biden back to his basement, and we will reverse the decline of this country. I'm a blue-collar kid. I work minimum wage jobs to be able to make ends meet. I understand the importance of the American dream, and I know how that's slipped away from so many millions of Americans. We'll restore it. I'm a veteran who served in Iraq. I know what it means to put service above self. I'm also a dad and a husband to 6'5" and 3-year-old. I understand the importance of protecting parents' rights and the well-being of our children. In Florida, we showed it could be done. I made promises, and I delivered on all of those promises. 2024 is make or break. We're not getting a mulligan, no excuses. I will get the job done, and as your president, I will not let you down. God bless you all.
All right, what do you think? I was waiting for him to start. It's like it was like almost a robot that needed a reset. And what I don't know is did he not know that it was his turn? Because he kind of was smiling and just kind of staring off and into the general direction of a camera, or was he waiting for the crowd to be completely silent before speaking? I don't know.
Maybe the latter part.
You think so? Okay. It'll look weird because Brett had to say, "Hey, Governor DeSantis," he said it a couple of times.
Not too aspirational, but it was direct. It's aspirational in the fact that I will get it done.
Yeah.
The things you want. So, I mean, what more can you ask for, really? People say he's robotic and stiff, and his record has shown that he gets things done. I think he even, has a mug that says "getting shit done." And, there are so many problems to fix. If I had to choose someone who's robotic and stiff and gets things done versus basically a car salesman with an okay record, I'll choose someone who's going to fix all the problems. And, there's some people that they're in the back doing the work that no one wants to do. They may not be good on stage. And, he's accused of being stiff in many instances. I was listening to Ted Cruz's podcast, and he said that everyone on that stage in 2016, very experienced public speakers, everyone was nervous. He was nervous. And he has decades of experience.
Sure.
So everyone up there is probably nervous. It's a big platform. Very important night to make first impressions. But like I said, I want someone who's going to get the job done, and he has the record.
Right. Okay, well, let's just finish this up, and then we'll do final thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates on the stage tonight, and thank you to Milwaukee.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you on the campaign trail, from debates to primaries to the general election and the conventions before that. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I already said it, but I really do wish that there had been an opening statement.
Yes. That way they could actually get to the meat and potatoes when they were asked the issues, because a number of people were interjecting their background, some of them multiple times, but
right.
Most of them interjected their personal story. And, you do the opening statement, get out of the way, get to the meat and potatoes of what everyone wants to hear.
Yeah, I think there could have been a 1-minute opening statement. They could have grabbed 45 seconds from the UFO question to give somebody a 1-minute opening statement. But a 1-minute opening statement and then the 45-second clothing statement I thought was sufficient. Now, my question is this: was this debate and I'll ask you this question: was this debate for the Republican nomination for president, or was this debate for Donald Trump's running mate? Because remember, Trump is 40 points ahead in the polls.
Yeah, I could see why someone would say that. I don't think anybody really stood out as someone who could beat Trump, or even really Biden. I kind of view it as more of a slightly weeding out of a couple people.
Because let's also, Trump is, there's going to be trials, right? And we don't know when the trial. But I can promise you, whenever, and the Trump team is going to try and push those trials out past 2024, right?
Right.
But if he doesn't, and some of them may go. One of them, he said, let's push until 2026. You had 3 years to get the evidence against me. I should have 3 years to prepare, for my trial. So, but let's just say that he is convicted. There's going to be an appeal. He's not going to jail right away.
Yeah, but those take so long.
Yeah, it takes so long. So anyway, it is not a foregone conclusion that Trump would be in jail if he is found guilty, which would.
He may not even had a trial date.
Yeah,
if he's elected.
And if he has, and a verdict has come in, and then there's the appeal.
Right.
And it usually it triggers automatically. So, I'm thinking he's going to be able to continue to run, and there's just going to have to be something that's going to have to pull that 40 points. So that's the reason why I asked if this realistically was a VP. Now, a lot of these candidates have said that I'm an executive kind of guy.
Right.
I'm not
but
running for.
At the end of the day, are you really going to turn down that call? That's.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because the next election or 2 elections after that, you could run again as president and then actually be elected because people know who you are.
Right.
Because Biden was a vice president as well. How do you think the moderators and Fox did?
So I think they let the debate get away from them. I've been a firm believer, and I had this debate or this idea during the 2019 debates for the 2020 election, that the moderators should be able to control the microphones, and 30 seconds means 30 seconds and then click. Yeah. And everybody's microphone is turned. Now it's entertaining. It's entertaining,
and that's what they want because it increases the ratings.
Right.
I'm sure.
But if those are the rules, and you can manipulate people's microphones and turn things on and turn things off, you wouldn't have people talking over each other. But again, then it wouldn't be as entertaining. Then you wouldn't see people who are aggressive and are really trying to get after it. Yeah. Because I'll be honest, I don't think DeSantis ever went after anybody and just jumped in and tried to interrupt. Nikki Haley did,
not really.
Pence did, Christie did, Ramaswamy definitely did, but I don't really recall Burgum, Scott, DeSantis, or Hutchinson really aggressively jumping in and saying, I'm going to interrupt you and talk over you until you stop talking so that I can get my point across.
Yeah. There was a while I felt like we didn't hear from DeSantis, and, that's not good. You don't win by not losing, and some people say that his strategy was to just not lose.
Be safe.
To be safe. But people say, Vivek is gaining momentum. Well, he's not going to take momentum away from Trump. He's going to take momentum away from you and the other candidates. And so I think he could have been a little more bold. One of the raising hand questions, he goes, "Hey, we're not school children." I liked that. And another thing that I would comment, not just on him, but Pence and I think even Scott didn't answer the yes or no questions directly. And, when people are waiting for you to say yes or no and you go into why or your backstory, they're searching for the yes or no so much that whatever message you're getting across can get lost a little bit. It could get befuddled. So say yes or no. You're an adult. You're trying to be in charge, right? So be assertive, be decisive, and then give your reasons why.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So here's my my list that I have. So I think Ramaswamy won the debate. This is my personal opinion. Ramaswamy, and then Haley, DeSantis, Pence, surprisingly for me, then Christie, and then Scott, Hutchinson, and Burgum. That's the order that I called it.
I would switch the Burgum and Hutchinson mostly because, well, two things with Hutchinson. He signed the pledge and then didn't raise his hand.
Okay.
So that, and then when asked about the economy, the first words out of his mouth was, "I'm a governor of a pro-life state," which is good, but it's not relevant to the question. And, I mean, come on, abortion, we're going to mention it at some point. So, yeah, I like directness. I mean, I would definitely say that Vivek got the most attention because Christie went after him, Haley went after him, Pence went after him. I mean, a lot of people went after him. I've heard him better. I've heard Vivek better in the past. Had this tone like he was inspired by the Constitution, inspired by what it's to be American, and some older audience members and podcasters got rubbed the wrong way, saying Vivek was a little cocky. I mean, you kind of have to have some confidence in yourself. You have to have confidence in yourself if you want to be the president of the United States. And you're against a lot of people with a lot more experience than you, and you know that. And so you have to be assertive. So, no, good on him.
Now, a lot of people said, I think, that Ron was beyond surprised because he was prepared. Again, all these people have entire staffs that are dedicated to debate prep, but that he was prepared that everybody was going to have knives out for him. Do you think he was surprised that Vivek was the target of everybody? Or were you glad?
He was probably glad. I don't feel like he was prepared because maybe if he had prepared for that, he would have jumped in more. But,
But he may have had prepared answers for when he was attacked.
Right.
And he wasn't able to parlay those. Anyway,
right.
The Super PAC and the 400-page document that Ramaswamy had alluded to had come out the week prior, and it was a Super PAC for DeSantis that was trying to, because Super PACs aren't allowed to communicate with the candidates directly, so they put this open letter out there, wink, that this is our recommendation. Everybody's going to be coming for you, so you need to prepare for it. So I think a lot of his counterattacks and parries never left, those arrows never left his quiver, because he was not pounced upon like he had been preparing. And so I think that's kind of why he stayed out of the fray a little bit. And he's like, look, if somebody's going to be taking these hits, why walk into a body blow when Vivek is more than happy to be the punching bag.
But
it gives Ramaswamy more time.
Right. I do think he needs to prepare to. At some point, he is going to have to attack someone, and I don't mean the name calling and stuff like that. I mean, God, we got plenty of that in 2016, and it will happen at some point, amongst other candidates. But he does need to prepare some justified attacks on other people, because even if he is dwindled down to the last few remaining, I mean, that's going to happen.
Right.
So what critiques would you give to some of the candidates that just top of your head?
Yeah, so
to do better next time.
Yeah, so I think Haley doesn't really need any further guidance. I mean, she debated world leaders on the world stage. She's very poised. I thought she did well. Burgum, I got it. He was in pain. He was in pain.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of instances where I felt that he was nervous. And
Yeah.
you alluded to it. Everybody's nervous, right? But he some of his words, he had some of his words kind of broke at the end while he was talking, and he had to do big inhales and things like that. Tim Scott, I think, needs to be more aggressive. I don't know. I didn't see that Megyn Kelly podcast, but it seemed as though Scott got the least amount of time.
I can't recall who got it. He was down there. My critique for Scott was the same as I was alluding to earlier, with the yes or no question.
Sure.
Put the backstory towards the end of the question, because you get 30 seconds. You're supposed to respect that. That was my main critique for him.
Yeah. A lot of the critiques that I would do for Christie and Hutchinson, they were relying on their resumes. They're relying on their past. And I understand past behavior is an excellent predictor of
come up with a good plan
of future performance. But this is what I'm going to do as president. Now they both said, "Hey, look, I'm going to beat Biden," but these are the things I'm going to do. And beyond the lightning round, when they said, "Look, we're going to dismantle the Department of Education," Ramaswamy had a list, that he was going to dismantle it, and that's what he was meaning by there are three branches of government, not four. So this administrative government that's kind of just slowly sprung up is not a real part of government. But I think they relied a lot on their resumes. And then I already talked about DeSantis. He needs to be a little less robotic. I think he could have been more aggressive and jumped in there, but he played it safe and
I think he needs to play it. I think he needs to play it less safe, because you show some hunger. That's the thing about Vivek. He's, like I said, he is on every freaking podcast. I want to see DeSantis on more podcasts. Great for Megyn Kelly, but need a lot more.
Sure.
And because younger audiences aren't going to watch CNN on a regular TV. They may watch it on the internet, but podcasting, whether it's ours or someone else's, there are a lot bigger ones.
We're open.
We're definitely
to any of these candidates. We're open.
We'll give you a fair shake.
Yep.
But there's so many podcasters and so many people listen to them, of all ages, but especially younger ages. Go on famous YouTube people, that gets you a younger audience. Be out there, not just on the big networks, because that is an older audience, and yes, they're important. They tend to vote at a higher percentage, but you got to do more, and that goes for all candidates.
Well, let me talk about Pence.
Okay.
So he's the only one I didn't talk about. Pence, to me, was the biggest surprise of the evening.
I was super surprised. So I was a little surprised by Haley, but definitely surprised by Pence.
Yep. So, while he didn't make it into my top five, Pence came out swinging and was aggressive. The moderators had to control him.
I never would have expected punches between him and Vivek. I'm like,
yeah. He
went for the biggest kid in the room.
He did, and he was aggressive, and honestly, I've never seen he's never run for president before. right?
No,
So
but
I've
he's
never
been
seen.
governor,
He's been governor and he's been vice president. But and as the vice president, you're supposed to be the attack dog, and vice president is supposed to be the attack dog of the for the president and take some hits and really kind of get after it. But he was aggressive, and I have never seen him like this before. And I think a lot of the electorate would probably be pleasantly surprised to see Pence getting after it like that. I mean, he rolled his sleeves up.
Yes. Let's see. I was a little. I like Christie's record. I was a little disappointed that there weren't as many jabs. Like, he's usually a bulldog.
Right.
And he was, but not.
Well, ChatGPT.
Not as strong as some of the previous record. I forgot to mention this when I asked for how you thought the moderators and Fox did. It seemed to me on the lighting, like on that side towards Hutchinson and Christie, the lighting made them seem a little grayish. And, people, if they're watching it, people think with their eyes. And that can create some bias if they look like they're half dead.
That's a case in point, a classic case in point. In fact, the first televised debate ever was with Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And
people thought Kennedy was so handsome.
Yeah, but the biggest problem is under all the lights, Nixon was sweating profusely. And it really turned people off that he just was this puddle of sweat, and he just looked kind of grimy. And so for it to, lighting, temperature, all of this matters. It does. It matters. People look at and vote with their eyes. And John F. Kennedy was, I don't know whether they had different lighting or if he was just wearing a lighter sports coat. I don't know. Clearly, I wasn't there. I wasn't born yet. But still, I've seen the debate, and just absolutely sweating puddle of water coming out of Nixon. And so it was, people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible." And obviously Nixon lost.
Right. I forgot to mention this about DeSantis. I mentioned that, yes, I would prefer a robot who's going to get things done than someone who's a car salesman.
Sure.
However, I thought there were some missed opportunities for emotion. When you're referring to most likely a crowd that is all pro-life, they love their babies, right? We love our babies. And if you're a parent, hearing the heartbeat of your first child, there should be some emotion.
Sure.
Don't bawl like a baby. You're trying to be the most powerful person in the world. I got that, but just take a breath. Take a breath. A little crack in the voice, a little something, and then the sonogram of all three kids. A little crack, something. Just a little pause. And then there were a couple times when he got an applause, and he would look down. And I'm like, dude, this is a good moment.
Right.
Breathe, and then go back into bam, 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 bam. So, anyway, and then some people have criticized him for the cheesy smile. Like, either you know how to smile when you're nervous or you don't. It's like, okay, either do it or don't.
Right.
So,
any final closing comments?
I'm just curious to see what happens next.
I'm so glad you said that. I am very curious to see what happens next. This is a very talented pool of candidates. Obviously, there were some that didn't make the debate stage.
How do you feel about that? Anybody you wish had been up there?
It would have been interesting to see Elder up there. I heard, I'd just be interesting to see the take of a former congressman and former CIA officer to talk about world views and things like that. But you have to get
cut
that
1%.
Yeah, you got to cut it off somewhere. And
we don't want 2016 again with 17 people
and having 2 tiers of debates, and you're the the B team and this is the A team.
It's like the
and
kiddie table.
Yeah, it seemed like it was. Well, like I said, Kimberly, I'm super excited to see what's going on. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great learning experience, and we're going to be doing our best to get this to you. And so please keep tuning in to our episodes and have a great day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.